this live stream, so let me know if I'm coming through clearly for you. So it seems like today is going to be the start of the Canadian election, and here on the channel we're probably going to cover a lot of it and talk a lot about it as people sort of announce their policies and how that's going to affect some of the things we cover here on the channel, mainly housing, investing, potentially Canadian benefits, potentially even cryptocurrency if there's talk of that. These are the things we like to talk about here on the channel. If I'm coming through okay and you can hear me, let me know how it's going, where you're tuning in from. I always say hey in the chat because these streams are where I get to know people and get to recognize your name. So make sure you're participating in there. And what we're going to do today, we're waiting on Justin Trudeau to give his remarks. What we're going to do today is hop between different streams and different coverage of what's going on today as it happens live. I know lots of people have different opinions about different coverage from different sources, right? We've got CBC, we've got Global, we've got other sources as well, CPAC. We're going to be sort of flipping through these different sources, so the fact that I'm playing one on screen doesn't mean that I am endorsing one over the other, but that's what we're going to do here. I have these tabs open with multiple sort of versions of the coverage, and we're sort of just going to let these play, tune into Trudeau's thing, give them a little bit of an analysis as that actually happens, and listen in on what people are having to say. And all along the way, while you guys are hanging out with me here in chat, I'll be keeping my eyes on chat. So if you have any questions or anything that you individually want to talk about, let me know in the chat. You can use that at Russell Matthews, and it'll show up orange for me on my screen. I'll see it a little more clearly. I'm seeing people in the chat. Hey, good to see you guys. We've got Nella and Fiona and Katrina, Amon, Nancy, Danzig. I've seen you in here before. That's awesome. Same with Nancy. Hayden, thank you so much for the super chat. That's so nice of you to do. We're gonna throw this on. Okay. Top of the morning to you, Russell. Keep up the good work. Good morning. Go Leafs, go. I like it. Yeah, today I don't have my Leafs hat on. You hear Matthews has had a wrist surgery. Hopefully he's all good for the season. We've got Jackie. Great to see you all in here. We're going to be covering this all throughout the next 36 days because it looks like it's going to be, I believe, September 20th. That's what it's saying right here. September 20th that they're going to be actually having this election. So it's going to be the literally the shortest period that we could possibly have for an election campaign, because if it gets announced today, that's the 36 days ending on September 20th, I believe. So it's going to be interesting, and it's going to be jam-packed over the next little while. Hopefully the audio is coming through okay here, and Rosemary Barton, I believe, is the one on this coverage, isn't sort of overkilling my audio here. But yeah, so Trudeau right now currently is meeting with Mary Simon, who's the new Governor General after Julie Payette got sort of kicked out of office because of all of those crazy allegations about a toxic work environment. So he's currently meeting with Mary Simon, and it's expected that he's going to come out and talk all about the reasons why he wanted to dissolve Parliament, actually leading into this election. So it's going to be interesting. That's for sure. And since we've got this going on, as long as everyone can be nice to each other and keep chat civil, I'm going to throw this up here as well. Hopefully this shows up. There we go. We've got some chat up here on the screen, so I encourage you guys to hang out and let me know what you're thinking about. And here they come.
With me about the dynamic in Quebec right now.
I'll just say there he is with the whole family. He's coming.
There we go.
We'll just show this shot here and come back to the issue of Quebec. So there's Justin Trudeau with his wife, Sophie Gregoire Trudeau, his son, Xavier, who is now, I would say, like the same height as him, which is crazy. His daughter, Ella Grace, and Hadrian is the little one
that's
there,
max quality.
to the right of the Prime Minister. They are all walking over from their home to Rideau Hall. Of course, it'll just be the Prime Minister who goes in to speak to the Governor General. But these shots, all part of sort of what you're presenting to Canadians on the first day of you and your family, and how you're all working together. As I said, it is literally just around the corner in the garden from where the Prime Minister lives.
Okay, interesting.
Not the normal
Yeah, so
drive.
it's interesting that they're yeah, like you can see Trudeau's definitely going with the clean look again. All throughout the pandemic, he rocked the beard and the big long shaggy hair. Maybe that's gonna work better with voters, or that's what they think. Like I said, we're gonna switch between different versions of this coverage to get different takes, different perspectives, because we like to try to stay in the middle as much as we can. So we need to get different perspectives there. Okay, it looks like everyone's just covering this sort of same
You see him,
shot.
he is walking with his wife, Sophie Gregoire. typically the Prime Minister will meet with the Governor General. They'll have a brief discussion in this case about why the request for the dissolution is being made, when Parliament will be summoned after the election, and what the date of the election would be. As you can see there, we just saw the Clerk of the Privy Council and the Secretary to the Governor General
Okay.
for the Prime Minister. They will have at this stage prepared 3 proclamations, one to dissolve Parliament, one telling the Chief Electoral Officer to get some writs ready, and the other one telling us when Parliament's going to be back.
Oh, and we're going to find out when Parliament's going to be back.
Go ahead.
Okay.
We're setting the stage basically to take all the formal legal measures necessary to hold this election and dissolve Parliament. And thereafter, I expect the Prime Minister will come out probably in front of Rideau Hall, which is a relatively recent innovation, but it seems this is what Prime Ministers like to do now. And he'll probably tell us why he felt it was necessary to dissolve Parliament at this time.
And my understanding was that Rideau Hall was not thrilled with that development of prime ministers giving campaign speeches in front of Rideau Hall, which is supposed to be a non-partisan institution in Canada, but obviously things have evolved in that direction. We were just talking about the fact that the Governor General, and you and I were talking about this the other day, can theoretically always say no. That's not expected to happen in this situation because there hasn't been a very recent election and there's no one else ready to jump in and form government. When the Governor General is considering this request, do you have a sense of how long we expect this to take? Will it be
This is good to know if we're going to be sitting here forever before we hear Trudeau like actually say what he's going to say about this.
Quick. Again, this is not an area where the Governor General would be able to exercise much discretion. The conditions that you mentioned earlier, that had there been a recent election, or if some of the opposition parties were claiming that they could form government and make this Parliament work, that could create, in theory, a bit of pause on the part of the Governor General. Neither of those conditions is being met right now. So it really depends on how much time Ms. Simon wishes to spend with the Prime Minister to discuss things and that kind of dynamic. But I would imagine that the Prime Minister is eager to get back in front of the doors there and tell us what's happening in terms of his logic.
And we're just watching as this unfolds, the Prime Minister and his family making their walk across Rideau grounds. Of course, normally they would be coming from 24 Sussex, but because it is currently set to receive renovations, the Prime Minister and his family have been living on the grounds at Rideau Hall, not very far at all from the Prime Minister. I can see them coming up on the Governor General's home, Rideau Hall, right now. Let's take a look as we watch the Prime Minister prepare to go inside here. We're just waiting a few moments.
Okay, let's see if this has a little bit better coverage of this.
The Prime Minister's riding.
Minority governments do typically only
So they're
last
heading in.
18 to 24 months. So, you know, this would get us around the life cycle of minority government. But again, the issue for the Liberals, at least from this first day and maybe in the coming days, will be to make this argument about why this is needed right now. And how Canadians should feel about having to go to the polls as we still battle this pandemic. They are now inside Rideau Hall.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm curious about chat. Like, how do you feel about an election being called right now? Like, do you actively want the opportunity to sort of like give the government an assessment of how they've done over the past 2 years, or like through COVID, like one of the most intense times? Is this something that you want, or do you think that it's sort of like going to like, or do you think it's kind of in bad taste to be calling it now when potentially they could go back to Parliament and keep working on like getting legislation passed because there is still like functioning Parliament, right? What Justin Trudeau is going to come out here and say is like, hey, like we couldn't do anything. The Conservatives were blocking us. The NDP were blocking us. Everyone was not letting us get our legislation through. So we need to call an election. Do you think that's the case, or what do you think about all this?
Really a topic right now. I think we need to focus on getting back in track, you know, getting our lives back to normal.
I feel that nobody's in a mental state to really make any decisions, and based off the way in which the world has been unfolding, it's kind of manipulative.
I think it's way past time for change, so anything that expedites that, I'm glad for that.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, I wonder if we have any other coverage of this like continuing now. Everyone's just like waiting out here for him to come outside.
For the launch of the campaign. So we'll come back to our political commentators in a moment, but right now.
This is his.
Pointing out is already in my.
The Pride event is happening in Montreal today. Jagmeet Singh will participate. Justin Trudeau will not participate out of some public health concerns. So that's where they go. And we'll hear from Aaron O'Toole, who is at a specially built TV facility. That's where Abigail Beeman was, of course. And Yves-François Blanchet, the Bloc Québécois leader, of course. He'll be sticking in Quebec for the whole campaign, and we'll hear later from the Green Party leader, Annamie Paul. The Green Party, in the last election, we haven't talked a lot about them, but the Greens in the last election, 2019, I really thought they had an opportunity, the last election with Elizabeth May as leader, and they did, they did not too badly on their popular vote, but they won that seat in Frederick.
Yeah, I'm seeing in chat, this is something that's interesting too. Like the fact that they're calling an election right now means that there won't be any ability to legislate until the end of this election, right? They were supposed to go back to Parliament, I thought, at the beginning of September. So this is going to be an extra 20 days that they're actually not able to get legislation through.
The absence or the ebbing of the Green support, where does it go and who will it help?
Yeah, a key question. I can't recall ever seeing a federal party implode the way the Green Party has so close to an election, willing to attack their own leader. Will be very interesting to see where that goes. Last election, as you said, we were having a very different discussion about maybe it will be the Green Party's time. That didn't happen. David, I want to talk to you because you are a great knower of political history and fellow political nerd like me. How uncommon is it to see a prime minister make the decision to bring down their own minority government? I mean, Jean Chrétien did it with a majority government, went early. But this decision now, a lot of folks are upset about because they're saying, well, it breaks a law that states that federal elections should be held every 4 years. Obviously, we know that's not, I mean, it does break the law. However, the Constitution overrides the law. But there's the political calculus in this, too, of how unusual or common it would be for a prime minister to make the decision to hit the hustings when they believe it's advantageous for them and not wait for the opposition or that fixed election date.
I don't think it's unusual at all, in fact. In fact, it's what any premier or prime minister who is leading a minority government is looking to do all the time, and that's turn their minority into a majority. So it is not unusual. What is unusual and what is unique right now is that the world and Canada are in the midst of a pandemic, a public health hazard, where in most jurisdictions, the public health authorities are saying, please avoid large gatherings, certainly be social distance and so on. And to that extent, that's where the person precipitating this election, that would be Justin Trudeau,
I think that they
has
put
to
something
speak
out.
to how he thinks this can be done safely. And I got to say, there's going to be 250,000 Canadians who will go to work for Elections Canada. I don't know if you know that, but it takes a lot of people to mount a general election. These are people who count the ballots, people who are manning the returning
There was something I saw on
offices and so on.
Twitter
250,000
yesterday
people.
that
and
was
the chief electoral officer
that was talking about like the negative reaction to Trudeau launching this election and how that like actually might hurt him in the polls.
People, retired people, and they're the people who are saying, I'm not going to be going out near crowds. I'm going to hang around at a polling place. So that's an issue. The chief electoral officer also made several requests of the government to make this election even safer for election workers and for voters, among them to change the voting day. By law, the voting day, the general election day, has to be on a Monday. And we're going to hear the Prime Minister, we assume, name the general election day of Monday, September 20th. The chief electoral officer said, that's not the safest day of the week. We'd rather do it over 2 days on a Saturday and Sunday. Why wouldn't it be safe on a Monday? Well, for one thing, a lot of times polling places are in schools. And many school authorities in the provincial elections we saw forbade any election happening in their schools. They don't want strangers possibly carrying COVID into schools. And so it's more difficult to find polling places. Also, one single polling day is 12 hours long. That means poll workers are wearing a mask and they're going to be tired for 12 hours. The chief electoral officer said, please change to Saturday and Sunday. We'll have 2 8-hour days. Now, those requests and others were made by the chief electoral officer in November. The government put together some legislation to make those changes, and the government never passed them. So Justin Trudeau is going into this election with the same old rules that the chief electoral officer wanted changed to better protect the health and safety of 250,000 election workers, as well as the 15 million people who will vote in this election, and he failed to do that. And I think that will be something that he will be held to account for if we do see some spikes anywhere in the country as a result of this election. I should point out that in parliamentary hearings over the spring, we heard from the chief electoral officers and public health officers from BC, Saskatchewan, New Brunswick, and Newfoundland and Labrador, and they all testified that they did not, or they could not trace any spikes in infections in those provinces to the elections in those provinces. But it's definitely something that is going to be monitored. Did this election, is it a risky bet given the public health environment right now?
And even if there aren't spikes in schools, the possibility there could be a case.
Yeah, if you guys are just tuning in, I'm seeing a couple people who are just hopping in here now. We actually haven't seen what we're here to see yet, so make sure you stay tuned in, because right now Justin Trudeau's inside of Rideau Hall talking to the Governor General, trying to essentially launch this election, and we're expecting to hear some remarks from him after this meeting, which should be ending any minute now. And once that meeting is done, that's when we're actually going to hear Trudeau address Canada as a whole, and potentially talk about some of the reasons, one, that he's calling the election, two, some of maybe the things that he's campaigning on, some of the promises, some of the ideas that he wants to push forward. We know that the Liberals have been super huge on getting this universal childcare sort of plan worked out, so that could definitely be a big priority. It definitely seems like what they've been pushing the hardest on lately. So, but we would have no idea what he's going to bring up here. So it's actually it's pretty consequential what's actually going to be said here.
As well to Mr. Trudeau for having called this election. So those are things that we're certainly going to be on the lookout for, both professionally and personally. Also going to be an issue with the Conservative campaign. Let's head over there now. We have our Abigail Beeman. Mr. O'Toole has made about 7 stops over the past 4 weeks, pre-campaign stops, and they came with promises like guaranteeing every Canadian will have access to high-speed internet by 2025. That's especially been an issue in rural areas of Canada. And while that may not seem like a blockbuster commitment, it certainly is for those in the rural communities who are hoping to have access for that, and I've heard many promises about it over the years. Let's go now to our Abigail Beeman, who is at Conservative headquarters waiting for this to go. Abigail, just before we start to get into some of those.
Thank you very much for the super chat there, Alex. 300 seats incoming. Hail Supreme Leader Little Potato. Okay, interesting. Nice. Hope you're having a good Sunday, Alex. I appreciate it.
The rapid test. What are the safety protocols being put in place?
Yeah, all great questions. So we had to, of course, like we do with any campaign, fill out a form ahead of time in terms of travel information, personal information to provide. But this time we had to provide proof of vaccination. So I've already sent that in to the party, proof of double vaccination.
Okay. So
and that is the wording.
Switch over coverage here for a second. We're going to hop in here.
We knew it or not.
CBC was just showing the
out
the
and
podium.
printed. Those are the signs of Pablo Rodriguez, the deck lieutenant, the leader of the House for the Liberal Party.
There we go.
Our colleagues at Radio Canada got a sneak peek at some of those campaign signs. Something, as you know, you're going to see an awful lot of over the next 36 days. The Liberal Party slogan, because they also released some TV ads over the weekend, is "Forward Together," as they start to think about the pandemic moving forward. We are just minutes away from the official launch of the election, the 44th one for this country. I'm going to try and sneak in a quick chat with At Issue, because of course we'd make At Issue come out of their summer hiatus for this day, and you're going to see a lot more of them as well. Andrew Coyne, Chantal Hébert, and Althea Raj all joining me on this Sunday morning. Hello, everybody. How I missed you. Nice to see you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, I told you I'd call again, and probably sooner than you would have liked, but here we are. Okay, so the Prime Minister is meeting with the Governor General right now. We expect that this will sort of go according to plan, but I do want to get all of you to have one take about what he has to say, or what he will say, to explain why this is happening now. If there is anything that can explain why it's happening now. Chantal, why don't you start us off?
Oh, thank you. I've been curious to hear the rationale of the Prime Minister once he comes out. I'm not too sure that I can come up with a compelling, convincing one, but I'm guessing it's going to be that the situation and the context has changed dramatically since the last election in ways that no one could have imagined back then.
Hey, Hayden, thank you again. You guys are so kind here. Thank you for supporting the channel with that, Hayden. Election is going to be super important. Go vote. Yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting election. I'm with Hayden. Yeah, it's interesting that that there's even going to be an election. Certainly covering it as closely as I have, it seems like Parliament was functioning. They were getting things passed, but I think that they're likely going to say, "Hey, no, we weren't," and that's why we're having an election here.
The rationale that makes it palatable for the Governor General to say, yes, I'm guessing something like that, that the ground is shifted and Canadians should get an opportunity to appraise their political leadership and make a decision based on new circumstances.
Yeah, and let me correct myself. I've already screwed up the Liberal slogan. It's actually forward for everyone. Just so that I'll get that right.
Forward for everyone.
Day 2
I thought
of the
it was
election.
Build Back Better.
I'll figure out everybody else's slogan too. Andrew, your thoughts on how and if the Prime Minister can make a convincing argument as to why this needs to happen?
Well, he doesn't really have a convincing argument because the long and the short of it is he'd like to have a majority. I think, though, in politics, you answer the question you'd like to hear rather than the question you were actually given. And the question he'll want to answer is, why do I need a majority? And then he'll be able to say, look, if you like what we've been doing so far through the pandemic, give us a majority, and here's all the other things we can do. Here's the larger vision that we've been sort of talking about until now. And he'll make a nod in the direction of, if it weren't for the obstructionism and toxicity of Parliament. But I think he'll try to keep the focus, as you can see from that slogan, on what's coming up, on the future, on here's the.
By the way, thanks so much for tuning in, everybody. We're going to be covering this election from start to finish here. I'm sure there will be debates that we can cover and all sorts of things. So I appreciate you choosing to hang out with me here to watch it. If you haven't already done so, subscribe to the channel, like this video to get it out to more people. We're going to hang out here. We're going to try to be as in the middle as we possibly can throughout this whole election, because I feel like that's what people are looking for right now. Not as much slant, but maybe just some neutral coverage here. So if you appreciate that and sort of align with those ideas, make sure to like this video, share it out, let your friends know that that's what we're going to try to do here on the channel over these next 36 days. I appreciate every single one of you tuning in. Make sure to get involved in the chat because I start to recognize your names, and that's always cool for me to get to know who's watching here. I hope you're having a good Sunday, but let's listen in again.
With how well all the opposition parties, especially in the early days of the pandemic, had worked together. The NDP is, standing on the sidelines saying we're ready to support you for a full mandate. So the argument he has to put to people, but I don't think that Canadians really care that much, is why now, right? Like, what has changed? And frankly, not much has changed. He has willing dance partners. Even the Bloc, for example, on some of the Broadcasting Act changes, they were willing to dance with him. He does not need to have this election now. The truth is, the polls look great. They think that there is no better chance than now if they wait a year, because they'd have to wait through the Ontario election, through the Quebec election next fall. Things might be more controversial. There could be some new scandals. Aaron O'Toole might have picked up. And so the timing is right, but of course he's not going to say that.
No, but, what about, though, as Chantal says, yeah, go ahead, Chantal, yeah.
But don't forget that you could have said exactly the same thing about the NDP in British Columbia a year ago, or the Conservatives in New Brunswick around the same period, i.e. minority governments who felt that the timing was good in the middle of a pandemic to get rid of the inconvenience of minority rule, and it worked rather well in both cases. It also means that both the Conservatives and the NDP at some point will reach the limit of how much of an issue they can make about the election call, because if it's good enough for John Horgan or Blaine Higgs, fellows of those two parties, how could it suddenly be worse for Justin Trudeau? I think the debate over the election will take place, but I don't think it's going to be a long debate. And by the way, talking about election signs, I live in downtown Montreal. The first thing I saw on Sherbrooke Street today, close to the corner of Saint-Laurent, was a big Bloc Québécois sign. So
can I just
it's
say
not
two
just
things?
the Liberals.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Interesting to
Two
get
things
all
about
these
that,
takes.
Renee.
Jagmeet Singh was out campaigning for John Horgan, so it is
So,
hard
like
to
I
say
said,
that. And then
this is what we're going to do. We're going to try, because I know that some people like some coverage more than other coverage. We're going to switch around the coverage that we're sort of watching here to get different takes, different skews, try to stay as neutral as possible. If there's a coverage that I'm not using that you think like, hey, like there's some interesting things going on, make sure to at me in chat, and I'll try to take a look at whatever you'd like me to take a look at.
Maybe a good example of that in terms of updating the Broadcasting Act. Conservatives were saying that this infringed on free speech and that they couldn't vote in favor of it. And then the Liberals really did a very poor job of trying to set their messaging straight and trying to straighten out that whole issue. So, you know, where Conservatives pushed back, I think Aaron O'Toole will argue that the reasons why that happened. But certainly there was a lot of frustration along the way when you saw stalling that took place. And we've heard from the Prime Minister that that's become his refrain, right? That the opposition has been blocking the Liberals' ability to get things done. So definitely two sides to that story, and we'll be watching to see what that messaging will be.
Also, I wanted to bring up one way that you can send things to me and get things potentially on here and shown if it's something that's sort of pertinent to the conversation that we're having. This is something that I haven't been very active on in the past, but I'm spending a lot more time on it lately. So if you have Twitter, feel free to follow me here at Russ Matthews 32, and I have I tweet a little bit about politics, a little bit about cryptocurrency. That's what I'm interested in lately. But if you want to get some information to me, make sure to follow me here at Russ Matthews 32. You can tweet at me, and I'll see that midstream and potentially be able to take a look at whatever we're talking about.
Mike, what's the symbolism behind kicking off the NDP's campaign in Montreal today?
Well, there is a little bit, and there also is just some basic scheduling. First, the scheduling. Jagmeet Singh was already planning to come to Pride Parade here in Montreal, which is happening a little later on this afternoon. And secretly, some of the NDP handlers...
At Carp123 says, what do you think his reason will be for this election? I think he's going to say that Parliament was dysfunctional. They didn't pass a few of their bills right at the end there when they were sort of rushing a bunch of things through. So I think they're going to say, hey, we've seen obstructionism in the House of Commons. We can't actually function as a minority government because they're just blocking us. The NDPs won't support us all the time. Bloc Québécois won't support us all the time. The Conservatives, the Liberals will say, have just been delaying things and like filibustering various bills. So I think that's what Trudeau's going to say to sort of justify the fact that he's the one triggering this election. There's been no vote of non-confidence in the House of Commons, which would typically trigger an election, right? Like on April 19th, when they released the budget and subsequently debated that budget, that was a time where, like, hey, if they didn't get the support they needed to pass that budget, that could have indicated, like, hey, we need to go to an election because we're not functioning as a minority government. But up to this point, we sort of have been. They've passed the majority of their big legislation, so it's going to be interesting to see Trudeau sort of try to justify the fact that he is actually calling this election himself.
Was in the riding of Drummond, which is just east of Montreal here, and he is also going to be back. Both of those lost in 2019. They're hoping to channel some of that Jack Layton feel. Of course, on the eve of the 10th anniversary of Jack Layton's death, something else that will be marked by Jagmeet Singh when that happens a little later on during the campaign, and something that may also bolster this campaign as they go on. I was also talking to Alexandre Boulris, who is their only MP on the island of Montreal. He's here waiting for Jagmeet to arrive with his wife, by the way, Jagmeet's wife. They just announced on social media that they are having a baby, so that'll be something else that will be front and center here. His wife, Gurkiran, who will be coming, will be part of the campaign as she was in 2019, and likely, you know, picturing him as an expecting father will be something that the NDP will likely be trying to do as well. But Boulris was telling me that, yeah, this is really a different...
I think I'm going to go pour myself some more iced coffee. If you want to take this chance to go make yourself a coffee, grab a drink of any kind, we're going to chill here until we hear from Trudeau and hear what his explanation is.
on that. Going to talk to people about a number of different issues. They're saying that if you're wearing a mask and you're at a bit of a distance, that people seem comfortable. But the biggest difference is that his campaign office is ready to go, and they'll be having a launch party at some point this week, but with nobody in it. So it'll be virtual. And that's what they just have to do now, understanding that this will be a very different campaign and not possibly being able to feel the campaign, because that's what a lot of these rallies are, right, Mercedes? You can see the momentum. We saw that with Jack Layton in 2011, where people were rushing across the street, stopping their car, double parking their car just to go shake his hand and go see him. Same thing with Justin Trudeau in 2015. You saw him pack those arenas, and that momentum was very visible on the campaign. You won't be able to see this now when we're going to have this mix of virtual and in-person events, but really limiting it. And that's partly the reason that we're at Parc La Fontaine here just sort of east of downtown Montreal, and that we're outside doing this. You're going to see a lot of this now. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh being outside trying to meet people at a distance, the elbow bumps, the masks, everything. Also worth noting, if anybody's coming to Montreal, I'm going to give you a bit of tourist advice. La Banquise is the best poutine in all of Montreal. It's around the corner from here. And Mercedes, I'm not going to say that after this hit I might be going there, but if you see some gravy on my tie, that might be the reason why.
Okay, like I said, we're going to sort of swap around here. Let's pull this up and see what's going on here.
If she is going to stay on as leader, it is do or die, Rosemary, for Annamie Paul.
And just to remind people that
lots of talk about Annamie Paul. Her party almost her party almost like booted her out of her leadership. Like they were holding a referendum on like saying like, hey, we don't want you to be our leader anymore. And that happened right before this election's being called. I can't remember a time that something of that had happened like that to a party where like, oh man, they were questioning their leadership, like booting them out right before an election.
Questions about her leadership, and there were hopes, I think, David, that they could not only hold on to that seat that Jenica Atwin won, but build off it. And now that those hopes are very much, I think, in question.
100%. This was supposed to be, every election is supposed to be a breakthrough election for the Greens, but they were hoping that this was going to be an election where, they could soar. They have a new leader. Climate change is a big issue, especially right now with the wildfires and the heat dome and all that kind of stuff. It's on top of the minds of voters, but this is not going to be at least it's going to be, it's a difficult time for them. They're starting this campaign off with so many challenges, Rosemary.
All right, and as you say, David, the first challenge for Annamie Paul to win that riding, Toronto Centre. She's not choosing an easy riding to win either. She's got some strong competition there, certainly in the form of the Liberal MP, soon-to-be candidate Marcine. Thank you, David. We'll come back to you through the morning. Appreciate it. That's David Thurton. He's in Toronto. The Prime Minister is still inside Rideau Hall, about 25 minutes now in there, meeting with the Governor General. There's probably coffee or tea, as well as conversations about why Parliament should be dissolved at this time. Traditionally, Governor Generals, though, hear those arguments and accept the advice of the Prime Minister and call an election. Probably the longest time I looked at that very.
Yeah, Richard saying here, most minority governments last less than 2 years. Why should this be a surprise that an election is being called? Yeah, that's fair. Like this is the average amount of time that a minority government would survive. But typically there's some sort of vote of no confidence or like a compelling reason that election is being called, like the other parties like won't support key legislation from that government that's in power. That didn't happen this time. It's actually like the Prime Minister actively going to the Governor General saying, hey, we want an election. I'm certain he's going to come out here with different reasons for why he's doing what he's doing, but it's interesting. And I saw this tweet from JJ, what's his last name? JJ McCullough. Very conservative leaning, but a great Canadian creator here. And he was saying that he did the research, and apparently like 80% of the time when a minority government dissolves itself for an election, they typically will win, right? Because, of course, if they have the power to dissolve it or not dissolve it, they're only going to choose to do so when they feel like they're in a strong position. So based off of history, whenever this has happened before, it's been an 80% chance, if I'm remembering this data right, that the current Prime Minister would be re-elected again. So that's some interesting stats there.
And then he's going to be getting on his campaign bus. The first stop is in the Montreal region, where, of course, Papineau is his home riding, but it's also a key battleground for the Liberals. They've got 35 seats in Quebec they want to hold on to and potentially grow. The rest of the itinerary, it hasn't been released yet, but we know that Toronto, Vancouver, some of those urban centers outside of the GTA Also key battlegrounds. We expect Trudeau to hit those ridings hard and early on, as well as spending time in Atlantic Canada and as well Alberta, where the Liberals think that they have potentially 3 seats that they could turn red, another 2 that they're eyeing. But the Liberals need to keep all of their seats, gain another 15 if they want to get to that majority that they're seeking.
And how often are you, just to go back to the rapid test, David's got some here as well. I'm going to make him do it live on TV probably, but I won't do that to you, Ashley. How often are you expected to do that? Have you been given any indication of how many times you're expected to do that through the week, through the day?
Well, this bag was just dropped off right now because we've got to do it an hour before we get on the bus, which is around 1 p.m. So David and I are going to have to do this pretty soon. We're told every day these rapid tests need to be done in order to be part of the campaign, and that if you do test positive, you're not getting on the bus that day until you do probably a PCR test. The Conservatives are also going to be doing rapid testing. There's a whole host of measures that the parties are putting in place, as long as talking to experts. And one of the other things that's interesting is the Bloc Québécois, they're putting plexiglass inside their bus to separate the journalists that are inside and the staff, because it's considered a workplace. You spend so much time on the bus, you know, working during the campaign, that's a measure that they're taking.
Yeah, I mean, just one of the many challenges.
I see the Fall Roast tagged me at Russell Matthews, probably running out of tactics to avoid accountability, already prorogued, filibustered, and even suing the Speaker of the House, need majority so they can do as they please. Well, certainly like that, yeah, like that's the reason they want, like anytime a minority government is in power, they're looking for a chance to get a majority because of how much easier it is for them to push forward with the things that they want to do if they don't have to get overwhelming support from the opposition. Yeah, good point, Fall Roast.
I'm a little bit afraid, Rosie. I'm not going to lie. We have to do this every single day, and you know, it's got to go
right up there. Right
there's
to
one
your
option
brainstem.
that I have to do this. Insert the
Okay,
swab
this
into
is
the nostril
not
parallel to the palate.
they're talking about
This
what
should
they're
be
going to have to do.
equivalent to that from the ear to
Let's
the
pull in
nostril.
another source here.
This is something we have to do every single day. So this is we had to sign.
I got to figure out a better way to do
an
this.
attestation essentially as the CBC to the campaign that we are all double.
Mute that and
bit of a disaster for them. For the Conservative Party, it would be pushing above 30 points and at least maintaining its position as the official opposition. And for the NDP, it's getting back into the mid-20s in terms of popular support and picking up some seats from the Liberal Party. The Bloc Québécois, as long as it does what it did in the last election campaign, they'll probably be pretty happy. They will assist in holding the Liberals to a minority. And as far as the Green Party, just getting through this thing is probably what they want to do.
Daryl, I'm just looking down at my phone here because we have some breaking news about Afghanistan. As you know, Kabul is expected to fall within hours. I have multiple Canadian veterans contacting me saying that there are hundreds of former Canadian interpreters still on the ground who have not been evacuated. The Canadian government has promised to get them out, but they have shut down the embassy. Global News first reported on Thursday exclusively that the embassy was in full rip-out mode. If you've seen the movie Argo, you know what that looks like. They're burning classified documents. They're preparing to leave. My understanding is that the last plane with Canadian staff from the embassy and Afghan staff from the embassy has departed.
I know very little about that, but from what I've read is that is an intense situation. Oh my goodness. It seems like that like a total change to that country. But I'm not going to talk in an area that I'm not knowledgeable in. Oh, what? Are we losing it? You guys still with me? I hope you guys are still with me, and that's just global or something. Let's pull up this other source. This is CPAC, and that's still going. Maybe it's just because I have 3 streams going at the same time.
Canadians have been listening to Justin Trudeau's song sheet for 6 years now. It's not as if he's an untested
It's not
leader.
a good series of pictures to be looking at as a government announces a campaign. Helicopters taking off from embassy.
There we go.
And the problems facing Canada right now are quite severe, and this election is going to come down to trust. The Prime Minister has broken the trust of Canadians on any number of occasions across the political spectrum.
Okay, you guys are here. You didn't lose me. Good.
Mr. O'Toole is, fortunately for him, a little bit more of a unknown commodity. He has a chance to prove himself in front of Canadians, and I think that's what you're going to see over the next 36 days.
Kim, we heard a couple of our journalists.
If you're just tuning into the stream, we're expecting Justin Trudeau to come out after his meeting with the Governor General where he's triggering this 36-day election campaign. We're expecting him to give some remarks, talk about maybe some of the priorities for the election, maybe some promises we're going to get, but certainly an explanation as to why he's choosing to call an election today for September 20th. It's likely going to be the day that they do it.
know, how does Mr. Singh, for instance, let's start there, you know, take what might be volatility in the electorate and have people maybe rethink their choices or solidify their choices or question their choices?
Absolutely. And one of the things I love about Jagmeet and his leadership style is it really is about some positivity, calling to people to account for sure, but how do we move forward? And if people don't want an election, and let's be honest, no one ever wants one, but we're here now, but there is an apathy out there. And if I were trying to figure out for the governing party how to get people to the polling stations, so far, they don't really have a ballot box question to motivate them. Jagmeet has certainly given his supporters and those who are taking a second look at him to go, there's something about this guy I like. I like some of the people he's bringing forward. There's some really great candidates. Paul Taylor in Parkdale High Park is an extraordinary candidate. We're seeing really great candidates even in Quebec. People want to write off New Democrats in Quebec, but we're also seeing some of those who lost by a little bit.
Seeing a little bit of chat here and a little bit of conversation going on in the chat. If you're not already hopped in there, make sure you join in on that conversation. People talking about UBI, whether or not that's going to be a big topic here in this election. Certainly, I think if you watch the video on my channel, there is a guaranteed livable income commitment in the NDP's party's plan. The Liberals, like at their past party convention, they actually voted UBI as something that they, like, as a party they wanted to cover, but whether or not the leaders of the party actually choose to campaign on that, it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. Talking here about Julie Jarowicz's bill on UBI, saying DM9542 in the chat said Bill C273 is officially dead in the water. Well, likely if Parliament dissolves here, they would have to reintroduce it depending on like the outcome of the election. But even that bill itself wasn't supposed to bring in any sort of UBI. It was supposed to just make the finance minister do more like more pilot projects and things like that. So I think that some people kind of got the misinterpretation that like that bill was something that was actually going to bring UBI into effect. But on the channel we covered that a little more closely, and we actually went into the wording of the bill, and that's really not what it was. So even UBI supporters, some of them weren't in support of that bill because it was like, oh, okay, we get another study, but definitely a controversial topic and a controversial policy that we talk about a fair amount here on the channel.
People get back in school, they'll look at what's going on. I think that doesn't bode well for Jagmeet Singh or Aaron O'Toole. They need the whole 36 days of this campaign for people to get to know them and know what they stand for. For the Trudeau Liberals, I think there's a head start there. And it'll be, I think the real race will be September 6th or 7th all the way to the 20th. And that's when you're going to see everybody zeroing in and focusing.
Peter, can I hop in on volatility?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, go ahead. That's you're next, Ashton. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to say, look, unfortunately, we have this is just one.
Yeah, Alex K, thanks for tuning into the stream again. Alex is in a lot of these streams. It's good to see you. Saying, mark my words, CRB will somehow morph into UBI. How criminals make it happen, I can't predict that. Yeah, it'll be interesting. A lot of people have been calling that the CRB could transition into some sort of UBI. Right now, the CRB is slated to end at the end of October, but that would be something that potentially the Liberals could campaign on, saying, hey, we provided all this support, maybe we're going to do more of it in the future. The NDP will take credit for the CRB, saying, hey, we're the reason that it was the amount that it was, and we've been fighting for them not to lower it. So depending on how much voters are in favor of these benefits or not is another question entirely, though.
In terms of foreign policy, this Prime Minister has been weak on Russia. He's been weak on China. He is always a day late and a dollar short. We have
nothing more permanent than a temporary government solution.
Ready to be sent over to the Beijing Olympics in 2022 to be used as political tools by the Chinese regime. And we're doing nothing about it. And the Prime Minister has said little to nothing about it.
Right. I mean, it's and when you talk about to all of you, when we talk about the notion of volatility and predict what might pop up during the campaign, there is that. But
let's see what else is going on.
There's also.
We're gonna throw this over here. You guys get to see my desktop, and boom. There's got to be a better way to do this. Maybe I need more monitors.
It's all never really sort of happened. But this time around, you'll remember in the most recent budget, a finance minister and Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland said, we're going to make a deal with the provinces that will see $10 a day childcare across the country within a few years. And I got to tell you, I'm a little surprised at the speed at which they've been delivering on that promise. It's not complete yet, But just recently, Saskatchewan, Scott Moe, the Conservative premier there, one of those resistance premiers that doesn't like Trudeau very much, he signed on with the federal government to do a deal to bring $10 a day childcare to Saskatchewan. And that means that program's going, the $10 a day childcare is ready to go BC, ready to go Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Quebec, Newfoundland, Labrador, all the Atlantic provinces, just missing Ontario, just missing Alberta, where we have two other, quote, resistance premiers that probably didn't want to give Trudeau that political cover. So childcare, promise, that's a big promise, probably kept. Now, another promise that the Liberals have been making for a while, national pharmacare. And on that one, not very much work done at all. Nowhere near a national pharmacare program. And I guarantee you, you're going to hear Jagmeet Singh and the NDP really beat the drum on that. That is, the polls show national pharmacare is very
NC, I saw you, thanks for hanging out. I've seen you in here a couple times. Saying, Russell Matthews, I hope you have at least two, maybe time for a third. Are you talking about my my iced coffee? That's 2 cups of black iced coffee to start off my day. And also this look with the hat. This is my, oh, it's a Sunday and I slept longer, so instead of washing my hair and getting ready for a stream like this, we're gonna keep it casual. We're all friends here, so I figured that'd be okay. Yeah, but maybe I will get another iced coffee, NC.
Most Canadians, millions of Canadians have.
Oh, 2 monitors. Oh, not the iced coffee. That's so funny. Yeah, NC. Yeah, I've actually got 3. Maybe I'll show you my setup sometime here. I've actually got 3 that I've set up since starting this whole YouTube thing. It makes it a lot easier.
Done, cleaned up, get systems in place. They've made progress on it, but they haven't done that. And again, you should see some criticism on that. So
Falaros in the chat says, at Russell Matthews, Trudeau denied the childcare deal that he gave to Quebec. That tells you all you need to know about the Liberals. Interesting. I'm not sure exactly what that deal was or what happened, but I know they've been announcing a lot of childcare deals across the country. George here's saying, when the government dissolves for 36 days, we have time to submit your name for a candidate. Vote for Russell. That's funny. I don't know if there's ever a politics in my future. I think that there's some things that sound good about it, but also from watching some of these sessions in the House of Commons and how dry and how slow, like oftentimes when I'm reviewing things to cover on the channel to bring to you, like I'll watch it on 3x speed so I can watch through it because of how slow and sometimes it's pretty boring. I don't know if I could live my life like that, but that's funny. Thanks, George.
The resignations of Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott, and then the blackface scandal in the middle of the campaign. We thought, oh my gosh, that's certainly got to hurt the Trudeau brand. And yet I think, I don't know, maybe Darrell Bricker polled on it, but I don't think it factored into a lot of Canadians' choices. Or if they did, it was a couple of weeks that they sort of frowned and whatever. So that was the 2019 election. Now, you're right. Since then, we have had some other sort of issues around ethics. And, you know, the reporting that you've led on the military sexual misconduct, you know, has, I think, front and center. And I think we're going to hear some questions about that. We'll see if voters want to punish the government for the actions of a bunch of male generals and admirals. We'll see. On the We Charity scandal, I think if Canadians have felt badly or changed their views on the government, the polls on that have already been baked in. That's already done, and yet we see where Trudeau's at. So, you know, ethics is definitely something the Conservative Party has been very keen to try to hammer the Trudeau government on. And, you know, I think historically speaking, we can look at when Liberal governments have fallen, you know, I'd say the Chrétien government, or what remained of the Chrétien government, the Martin government essentially, you know, it was ethics. Back then it was sponsorship. Eventually Canadians just went, okay, entitlement and arrogance of these Liberals, I'm fed up with them. Are we at that point yet? The Conservatives are definitely going to try to say, yes, we are. They're not qualified to be government, these arrogant, entitled Liberals. But I'm not so sure voters are yet ready to punish the Liberals just on their ethics violations. I think it may be more, you know, on things like I want pharmacare, and this NDP party, for example, is promising pharmacare. It'll be something along those lines. I think that's more the mood of voters at this point, rather than punishing Liberals for ethics violations, though there's definitely, we're going to hear about ethics during this 36-day campaign.
David, let's talk geography. Where does the party need to focus its efforts in the weeks ahead? Where are they at risk to potentially lose seats?
That majority they lost their majority, if you ask me, in Quebec when the Bloc Québécois won 32 seats. almost all of those came at the expense of Liberals. And there's a lot of Liberals. Some are coming back for a second run, some that lost to the Bloc, particularly south of Montreal and north of Montreal. So I think that there's probably a good reason why Trudeau.
By the way, if you're just tuning into the stream, you haven't missed it yet. We're still waiting on Trudeau to come out and talk about why he's calling this election. He's currently in a meeting with the Governor General. You can see right here on this podium. That's where he's going to come out and sort of talk about the reasons that he's calling this election and what the Governor General said, if this election is actually going to happen, which, like, Governor General's not going to say no. That's very, very unlikely. But we're going to potentially get some election promises, some reasons that they're calling this election, the things that they're focusing on. So make sure to stay tuned here, because we still haven't heard from Trudeau. We just heard a lot of analysis about what's going on here. And make sure to get involved in the chat. Drop a like on the stream if you haven't already done so. Those likes, I think, actually do help a lot in terms of, like, if this video gets shown to other people when they open up their YouTube app. So if you appreciate this kind of coverage and want to support more Canadian content on the internet, then make sure to like it and share it with your friends if you can. I appreciate all of you for hanging out with me here on a sunny Sunday morning where I am.
The last 6 months, not just recently, 6 months, he's polling at 40%. So that's a drop from Scheer's popular support of 80, O'Toole at 40 in Alberta. And where would that support be ebbing away? In Calgary and in Edmonton. I think you'll see Calgary Centre in play, held by Conservative. I think a Liberal has a chance there. Calgary Skyview, that's the riding by the airport. I think Liberals have a chance to win that. Then we move up to Edmonton, and we start it right now. One seat in Edmonton is held by the New Democrats, Edmonton Strathcona. I think the Conservatives could lose Edmonton Griesbach, which is just north of that, held by Conservative Kerry Diot. That could go NDP. And now we start to talk about Liberals possibly picking up some other seats in Edmonton, sort of moving towards the southeast. Edmonton Mill Woods used to be Amarjeet Sohi's riding, a Liberal.
This is interesting. I want to show you something here. On Twitter here, which is I'm monitoring as we do this. There's my desktop. So on Twitter right now, actually something that's trending. Politics, of course, Canada is trending because that's like, we're going into an election. But also trending is CERB, which is interesting. It could be that the CERB and the benefits that have been rolled out over the past year could play a factor in this election as a potential either for or against vote of these supports and things like this continuing into the future. A lot of people are arguing that, hey, we're having trouble getting workers back into the workforce because these benefits are still around. But other people are saying, hey, if you're on these benefits, you need to be looking for work. So it's written into the legislation that this isn't the case, as well as criticisms of people saying hey, maybe they're just not going back to the restaurant and service industries because the pay is garbage, right? So there's lots of different takes on this, but it seems like it's coming up on Twitter as well. By the way, you can follow me at RussMatthews32 if you're on Twitter as well. So CERB has ended. Maybe people are growing a backbone and don't want part-time minimum wage, no benefits job. Definitely lots of different sides to this take. This government's helped my family with Canada Child Benefit and CERB. They aren't perfect, but they are, to me, the best choice right now. And if the Conservatives somehow get in, even in a minority, this country would be in trouble. Okay, so a very liberal, positive take there. Interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. What do you guys think about all of that as we're waiting here to hear from Trudeau as to what is going to be happening here? Let's pull back up this coverage.
That could be a factor in who they vote for too.
Yeah, absolutely. We shouldn't suggest that most young people aren't going to be going out to vote. A turnout among young voters was very high in 2015, and it went down in 2019, but was still higher than it used to be. So a lot of those voters that might have came out for the first time in 2015, they came out again in 2019. So young voters are getting more engaged, but for the New Democrats, they really need to make sure that they're supercharged and that they go out in the polls in really enormous numbers.
Yeah, and the ground game factor is important there. And we know by virtue of money and machinery that the Liberals and Conservatives have a stronger game than the NDP and the other parties, for sure. I'm informed here that someone put a glass of water on the podium, so I am hopeful that that's a sign of a Prime Minister coming out soon.
The telecasters are like, man, we've just been trying to fill here for an hour.
45 minutes at this point as we wait for him to come out and tell us that indeed this election is underway. This will be Justin Trudeau's third election. He is now, though, and I will say this with all due respect to the Prime Minister, the old guy on the block. He was very young when he became Prime Minister, but Aaron O'Toole, Jagmeet Singh, and Annamie Paul, all younger than Justin Trudeau, incredibly. That's where we have ended up in our
I feel like
political time.
I
But
didn't
he is
know
also
that O'Toole was younger than Trudeau.
federal campaigns at being
That doesn't
a
track
leader,
for my brain for some
at
reason.
knowing how to campaign and how to win. So this, for him, a comfortable place for him. The same cannot be said probably for Erin O'Toole, who I will say, though, everyone I talk to around Erin O'Toole says he's in great shape and ready to go, in fighting form, if you will. Jagmeet Singh's done this once before, did not perform well, but the party decided that he did deserve another chance, even though it was not the outcome that they hoped for. So I will go to downtown Ottawa at this stage. Hannah Thibodeau is at the Conservative Party headquarters, and she's going to give us a sense of, that's all the party headquarters.
Oh,
Exciting.
cool.
The
So maybe
Greens
we're going to
there on
actually
the
hear
bottom
from
left,
all the
Conservative
major
Party,
parties.
and the NDP, who are starting their campaign in Montreal.
Potentially directly
Hannah,
after
I'll
Trudeau
bring in everybody
gives a
else
speech
after,
here.
but there are some people saying, okay, Erin O'Toole is not going on an airplane. He's just going to stand in that hotel room all day. But this is a particular decision they've made for a particular reason.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean he won't travel. This is just how things are starting.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things you were talking about before you led into me is that Justin Trudeau really is the most experienced leader on this campaign when it comes to going out there, doing these types of events. However, let's put it into this perspective. This is a COVID campaign. We are in the midst of the fourth wave, as the doctors are telling us. And when it comes to the leaders, the person that has the most experience in campaigning during COVID is Erin O'Toole. Remember, they had their leadership race in the midst of the pandemic. None of the other leaders have had that type of experience. So when it comes to reaching Canadians virtually, doing different events, not maybe on the ground, but in studios like this, these are the types of experiences that Erin O'Toole might have over the other leaders, even Justin Trudeau, even though he did do an international event during a pandemic. When it comes to campaigning, you can see that Erin O'Toole might have the edge over the other leaders during a COVID campaign. And being here too, Rosie, one of the things that Erin O'Toole and his team are pitching is safety, because of the fact that we are in or moving into this fourth wave. There's a lot of concern that the numbers will continue to rise, in particular in provinces like Alberta and Ontario, in Quebec as well. And they want to play it safe. They want to have this backup plan so that if they have to go full studio all the time because the numbers are on the rise, they can do so. But expect to see them here about 2 to 3 times per week. Heading out on the road as well, as you're mentioning. They do have planes, they do have buses, but expect to see a lot of this studio, and it's going to be that different campaign feel as well. We're sitting here going, this is different. We're not heading out on the road on the first.
While we wait here, here's an article that I found and was reading the other day, saying that even potentially after the fact that he's calling an election right now may actually kind of like backfire if Canadians determine like, hey, like this isn't the time for an election. I don't know what like people are going to actually think long term, but they're saying like it could be losing momentum. The Nanos research poll said there's a drop of 5.9 percentage points from 4 weeks ago, with only 33.4% voter support. That would be enough for a minority government, but it's like the whole point of why this election is being called is for there to be a potential majority government result. But based on this Nanos research, I guess it seems like that's less likely, with Conservatives trailing at 28.4%, NDP at 20.7%. So definitely the main competitors are the Conservatives and the NDP here, but this could also be, in terms of the NDP, a referendum on Jagmeet Singh, right? Not a great result last election. That's definitely someone who's popular amongst younger voters, but is that the work that he's been putting in there, like to secure the young vote, is that going, like, are the young voters going to come out and actually come through for the NDP? Or is this going to be something that says, like, hey, maybe this strategy isn't exactly working with what you've been trying to do? Interesting stuff for sure.
Particularly for Mr. O'Toole's own popularity numbers, which are not good in almost all public opinion polls, that he would need to get out there and meet people and see people and, you know, be seen bumping elbows or whatever he's allowed to do.
Yeah, we think of the campaigns, we go way far back to other campaigns where it's shaking hands and kissing babies. And that's one of the big things, those big crowds. We are not going to see the big crowds like we've seen in the past. They're going to minimize those numbers. In particular, provincial health authorities simply aren't going to allow the big crowds. As you mentioned, though, Rosie, when it comes to Aaron O'Toole, he is still not a well-known leader. And yes, he does have to get his face out there. I'm told that this is going to be a different campaign style for the Conservatives. So it will be quite fascinating to watch if this type of virtual studio 2 to 3 times a week will actually work for them, or if they will change tactics and hit the road more frequently like we've seen in other campaigns in the past, where yes, they are out there getting their faces face to face with other Canadians, but they're going to try to find ways to get that face to face contact without having to put themselves in a situation where it might not be as safe. Like, for example, heading to the Pride today, he won't be heading to that, and it's big crowds there. So there are those safety concerns right now, too.
Okay, so we've been on this for a little bit, so we're going to swap over coverage here. Boom. All right, let's see what's going on here.
Evidence, if my memory is correct, Prime Minister Harper had an event at a car manufacturing plant in southwestern Ontario later that day that he didn't make. I am not surprised that the Governor General, this is going to be a longer meeting. Part of it is, I think there's a need to rebuild some trust in the institution of Governor General in Canada after Governor General Payette. The other thing I should add, just as a disclosure, in a previous life, I worked for Mary Simon when she was president of the National Inuit Association, ITK. And you're right, Mercedes, she probably is asking.
Make sure to keep it friendly in chat, everyone.
But this is not, it should not be treated.
All opinions
as a
are
joke.
welcome here. If there's something that you don't agree with, it's always okay to ignore.
Democratically elected Prime Minister versus an appointed Governor General. But still, this is part of our constitutional approach. It is a check and a balance. I think it's really important. Granted as well, it is early days for this Governor General and this Prime Minister, although I'm sure that they've known each other previously. I do think that this process is important, and I'm not surprised that it is not being treated as a Tim Hortons drive-through trip to Rideau Hall.
And just to note there that the 2008 request was a prorogation request. It wasn't the dissolution, I believe, that took 2 hours. That's obviously different than making the decision to go to a general election campaign. Kate, when we look at Aaron O'Toole here, what does he have to do to establish name brand recognition? I hear a lot of folks anecdotally when I talk to them say, yeah, whatever, he's another Andrew Scheer. He actually is a very different leader than Andrew Scheer. He's a different person, very different life experience, different policies, different views. We were talking before about he was largely seen as a red Tory, and that was seen as a bad thing during the Conservative leadership race, but could serve him well here if he's able to actually translate that to convince perhaps some centrist or right-leaning Liberals to consider him. How does Aaron O'Toole manage to get that name brand recognition and for him to be seen as not, the way that Andrew Scheer was, another iteration of Stephen Harper?
Yeah, it is definitely a challenge when we are in a pandemic environment, and a lot of those interactions, Mercedes, are happening digitally and virtually. O'Toole has the benefit of coming from the Conservative leadership race, which was also fought very much on a digital grounds. There wasn't the typical traditional campaigning that happened there. And that actually was one of the things that I think led to O'Toole's success during the leadership campaign, was the use of digital and virtual technology in order to connect with voters. So he does have that background. He's got a pretty slick setup in terms of his events. So I think that prior work will definitely help him. Really, in terms of differentiating from leaders past, though, I think the focus needs to be on policy and on ideas. And one thing that Conservatives have struggled with in the past, including under Stephen Harper, is in putting forward a message of optimism and one of hope. I mentioned earlier the anxiety a lot of Canadians feel right now in this moment. I think it's really important for Conservatives to start talking about what they would do to try and manage the pandemic moving forward, but also what Canada would look like under their leadership. More and more voters are looking to align their votes with values. And I think for the Conservatives, it's really important that there be an ambition that's communicated there. Forget about your dislike of Justin Trudeau, because like it or not, a lot of Canadians still like the guy, even if Conservatives don't.
Okay.
Doesn't mean you can't be critical, but it needs to be more focused on what they would do.
I'm just going to jump in there because we're expecting the Prime Minister any moment. And Dhananjay, we missed you last time too, so let's go to you. Your thoughts before the Prime Minister walks out those doors and kicks this off.
Well, I think Canadians have seen that both the Liberals and the Tories haven't really cared about Canadians during this pandemic. It's been the NDP that's been doing the heavy lifting. Jagmeet Singh's been out there pushing the Liberal government to actually implement, whether it was doubling of CERB, whether it was the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. And I think Canadians are going to be really excited about the platform that we have to offer in this campaign.
Okay, and I'm hearing he's on his way, and there he is. We're watching him come out. Here comes Justin Trudeau. At the moment, still Prime Minister. I suspect he's about to become the Liberal leader as he announces the result of his meeting with the Governor General, Mary Simon.
Here we go.
Good morning. I want to begin today by addressing the unfolding events in Afghanistan. We've been constantly monitoring the rapidly evolving situation, and I've been briefed by officials earlier this morning to get the latest developments on the ground. As always, the safety and security of Canadian personnel is our top priority. The current situation poses serious challenges to our ability to ensure that safety and security of our mission. So as of this morning, Canadian diplomatic personnel are on their way back to Canada. We thank them for their tireless efforts to help the people of Afghanistan in their pursuit of democracy, human rights, education, health, and security. Our commitment to the people of Afghanistan, including women and girls and the LGBTQ2 communities, remains unwavering. And we will honor the sacrifices of Canadians, our armed forces, diplomats, journalists, and civil society have made over the past years. Our government has also committed to resettling up to 20,000 Afghans through the ongoing Special Immigration Measures program. Our ongoing work to bring Afghans to safety in Canada under SIMS remains a top priority, and we will continue to work in close collaboration with partners and allies on this commitment. Ministers Garneau, Sajjan, and Mendicino will be continuing this work throughout the coming weeks. Canada firmly condemns the escalating violence, and we are heartbroken at the situation the Afghan people find themselves in today. This is especially so given the sacrifices of Canadians who believed and continue to believe in the future of Afghanistan. We will continue to work with allies and the international community to ensure that those efforts were not in vain. We are committed to Afghanistan and to the Afghan people. Merci de vous joindre à nous ici à Rideau Hall aujourd'hui.
Thank you for being with us at Rideau.
Je me suis entretenu avec son
A few
Excellence
moments
la
ago,
Gouverneure Générale
I spoke with Her Excellency, the Governor General,
ma demande de dissoudre le
to
Parlement.
dissolve
Les
Parliament.
Canadiens iront donc aux
Canadians
urnes
will
le
be
20
going to their
septembre.
polls on September 20th.
September 20th confirmed.
Friends, it's been a big couple of years. The last 17 months have been like nothing we've ever experienced. And we're all wondering what the next 17 months, not to mention the next 17 years, will hold. A global pandemic, a global recession, a global climate crisis that's causing wildfires and flooding around the world. You're probably wondering what this means for you, for your job, for your kids, for your retirement, for your community, and for your country. Well, that's fair. But just look at what Canadians did in this time of crisis, in this time of uncertainty. When this pandemic struck, Canadians dug deep. You put on your mask to keep your neighbors safe. You followed public health rules, stayed home, and supported our frontline workers. And you rolled up your sleeves to lead the world on vaccinations. No one expected this crisis, but time and time again, community after community, you showed what mettle we're made of as Canadians. So don't stop now. If you haven't already, go get vaccinated. And if you have, talk to the person you know who still needs to get their shot. They won't necessarily be easy conversations, but they're important to have. We owe it to each other. Because with our actions, we show what it means to be Canadian. And now, more than ever, that matters. Look, COVID-19 wasn't something we expected as a government, either. But just like you, we knew that staying true to who we are and what we believe in was the only path forward. So from day one, we focused on having your back, because that's what we stood for, because that's what we've always stood for. That's why we came to Ottawa in the first place, to build a government that would stand up for the middle class and people working hard to join it. That was the real change we delivered over the first 6 years. In fact, the very first thing we did was to raise taxes on the wealthiest 1% so we could lower them for the middle class. It's the real change we delivered by lifting hundreds of thousands of kids out of poverty with the Canada Child Benefit. Real change by delivering clean drinking water to thousands of Indigenous people in over 100 communities. By building and refurbishing almost 200 schools so far so that tens of thousands of Indigenous kids have a better chance. It's a real change we delivered by pushing hard so that everywhere in the country there is a price on pollution, and then standing firm so that in no province is it free to pollute anymore. And those are the values that drove us to deliver the CERB and the wage subsidy to make sure that Canadians could get through this crisis, too. On a choisi d'être là pour les familles et les travailleurs.
We chose to be there for families and workers with CERB and the wage subsidy. We supported small businesses with loans and help with their rent. What we knew in 2015, and which is even clearer now, is that our future depends on you. And we've always stood for you.
Back, and now it's time to hear your voice. The decisions your government makes right now will define the future your kids and grandkids grow up in. So in this pivotal, consequential moment, who wouldn't want a say? Who wouldn't want their chance to help decide where our country goes from here? Canadians need to choose how we finish the fight against COVID-19 and build back better. From getting the job done on vaccines to having people's backs all the way to and through the end of this crisis. For example, as a government, we chose to make sure that federal public servants and everyone boarding a train or a plane be vaccinated. Not everyone agrees. Not every political party agrees. Well, Canadians should be able to weigh in on that and on so much more. We believe that a government's most important responsibility is to keep Canadians safe and thriving, and that's what we'll continue to do. On était là pour vous, et maintenant,
been there for you,
c'est à vous de choisir.
And now it's up to you to choose. It's up to you to express yourselves. The decisions your government is making now will define the future in which your children and grandchildren will grow up. We are experiencing a historic moment, and you have something to say about it. You have the right to choose the future of our country, whether it's to pursue our vaccination efforts or to support people until the end of this crisis. All Canadians should choose how our fight against COVID-19 will end and how we will rebuild back better. For instance, as a government, we've decided to ensure that public service and anyone who takes a train or a plane needs to be vaccinated. Not everybody agrees with this, and not all parties agree with this. So Canadians should be able to express their point of view. We believe that the most important responsibility a government has is to ensure that Canadians can thrive in a safe environment, and that's precisely what we'll continue to do.
I don't accept any party saying we shouldn't do everything we can to keep people safe and to end this pandemic and rebuild. And I certainly don't accept any politician saying you shouldn't have your choice on how to do that or on what comes next. Because as much as we've done over the past many, many months, we've got a lot of work ahead of us. We think families looking for childcare should get that now. We think workers deserve good middle-class jobs now. We think more ambition on climate change is needed now. That's what we think. So what do you think? You deserve a say, because this is your moment. C'est le moment dès maintenant.
The time has come to fight even harder for a safe and healthy Canada. The time has come to be more ambitious to create affordable housing and work harder on reconciliation, to be bolder in protecting the environment and growing our economy. My friends, this is the choice you have during this election.
Elders in long-term care homes and people who've worked hard for a good retirement but are struggling, I hear you when you say you deserve better. We're ready to make sure you get it. To parents thinking about how it just keeps getting more expensive to raise a family, to young people worried about how to afford a home, you're right. It is tough. Indeed, it's unacceptable. So we're going to continue investing in housing, and we're going to keep making life more affordable. To students raising your voices on the climate crisis, yes, I'm right there with you. This is a crisis. And yes, we're banning single-use plastics, and yes, we've won the fight for a price on pollution right across this country, but yes, that's not enough. Our planet and our future are at stake. So I need you alongside me in this fight, because together we can do so much more than we can apart. And to kids, you've missed birthdays and school days. This pandemic has hit you hard, and you stepped up to help your moms and dads, to help your community. And now we need to step up to make sure that you're safe, to make sure we're building you the best possible future. Real solutions to the real problems we face. A better, stronger Canada for everyone. That is your future to choose. And this is your time to choose it. In this important moment, maybe the most important since 1945, and certainly in most of our lifetimes, who thinks Canadians shouldn't have a say? After making it through 17 months of nothing like we've ever experienced, Canadians deserve to choose what the next 17 months, what the next 17 years and beyond will look like. And I know that we have the right plan, the right team, and the proven leadership to meet that moment. So to the other parties, please explain why you don't think Canadians should have the choice, why you don't think that this is a pivotal moment. Because I'm focused on our real plan. I'm focused on the path forward with Canadians. So to Canadians, I'm asking you to vote for real progressive leadership, for strong health care, for affordable homes, for a clean and protected environment. Make your voice heard, have your say, and together, let's move forward for everyone. Je vous demande d'appuyer un gouvernement.
I'm asking you to support a progressive and bold government, a strong healthcare system, affordable housing, a protected environment. Have your say, and let's move forward together.
Je remercie les membres des médias d'être ici
I want to thank the media for being here today, and over to you for questions. Thank
Oh, we're
you,
going to get media
Prime Minister.
questions. Interesting.
20 minutes of questions, starting with the Toronto Star.
You didn't use the word majority, but I know you would like a majority to enact that plan. However, the NDP says you have the confidence of Parliament. They'd support you in any of these measures that you talk about and all of these ambitions. So how can you justify to Canadians the need for an election that'll cost $500 million in the middle of a fourth wave when you said to Canadians you would not go to the polls before the end of the pandemic?
This is a really important moment in Canada's history. For the past 2 years, for the past 17 months specifically of the pandemic, we've been making really big, really consequential decisions. And in the last election, nobody was talking about what we might do in a pandemic. So the government, and indeed Parliament, needs an opportunity to get a mandate from Canadians, to hear from Canadians on how to end this pandemic, how to build back better in really meaningful ways. As Canadians know, this is a moment where we're going to be taking decisions that will last not just for the coming months, but for the coming decades. And Canadians deserve their say. That's exactly what we're going to give them.
Can you call an election just because? Yeah, can you call an election just because they think that we need an ability to call it, to like have a decision to give them a mandate? I thought you needed like actually dysfunctional Parliament. Okay, no, I think we're good now. I think we're good.
To have a more just, more fair, and more prosperous society for all by building back better. And I think it's important for Canadians to be heard on how they want this pandemic to end, how we will build back better. We are in a point in time where more and more Canadians have been vaccinated. This pandemic is not yet behind us. And Canadians deserve their say in the coming months and the coming decades.
What do you say to people who think that in gambling like this in the middle of a public health crisis, that if you don't get a majority, you should resign, your political future's at stake? Will you resign?
I think Canadians know that our democracy is strong. I think Canadians know that we are coming through this pandemic, that it's not over yet, and people need to continue to step up and get vaccinated to keep themselves and their loved ones safe. And that's certainly something I'm going to keep reminding people about every single day over the coming weeks. That people need to continue to do their part, protect their communities, protect each other, protect our kids who can't yet get vaccinated because they're under 12. I think this is a moment where Canadians can and should be able to weigh in on what we're going through and on how we're going to build a society that is stronger and better and learns from the challenges we've all experienced and the sacrifices we've all made through the worst of this pandemic. The pandemic is not over, and we're going to be taking consequential decisions on how we finish with this pandemic. And I think it's Canadians' right to weigh in on that.
Next question. Good morning, Prime Minister. Ashley Burke, CBC News. Sorry, Mr. Trudeau. During the last sitting of Parliament, you managed to survive the throne speech. You managed to get your budget passed, as well as get legislation through. Can you tell Canadians what your thinking is, why you need to have an election now in order to continue to govern, and provide some concrete examples of what you feel the opposition has prevented you from accomplishing?
I think all Canadians get that this is a historic moment we are living through. government and indeed Parliament has enacted significant measures to support Canadians through an unprecedented crisis. And we've done it in a way that met the urgency and the intensity of what we all went through over the past many, many months. But we're at a moment now when many, many Canadians are vaccinated, many more are continuing to get vaccinated, where I think it's right for Canadians to be able to pronounce themselves on where we're going, on how we get through this, on what the next steps are for fighting the pandemic as we face a fourth wave, but also what the next steps are for rebuilding our communities, our society, our country, so that it is better and more resilient for years to come. Canadians need to have their say. Nobody asked anyone how they thought we should manage a pandemic in the 2019 election. And together, Parliament and indeed Canadians have done incredibly well. We are leading the world on vaccinations. We've stepped up to protect our loved ones, and Canadians are continuing to step up. But it's time we had a national conversation, a national direction on those next steps. And that's exactly what we're going to be able to do over the next 6 weeks.
Following up?
Or however many weeks there are.
Can you also explain to Canadians who are tuning in why you are calling this election now when there are thousands of people in Afghanistan who you've promised to help, who are in severe danger of being captured or killed, and you're doing this on a day when you've just announced that the embassy is closing?
Again, we are extremely concerned about the situation in Afghanistan, and I can assure you that officials and indeed ministers continue and will continue to weigh in on protecting Canadians, getting Canadians safely out of Afghanistan, and continuing to step up, as Canada has so many times around the world, to bring people to safety. We will be accepting in 20,000 Afghans into Canada, and that means, once again, as Canadians have so many times, they get to step up and welcome people into their homes, into their communities who are fleeing horrific violence, building a better life for themselves, for their families, and through that work, building a better life for all Canadians. It's something that we've done. It's something we're going to continue to do. And our democracy and our democratic institutions are strong enough to be able to ensure that even as we do this important work for Afghanistan, we're able to check in and make sure that Canadians have their voice on the extraordinarily pressing issues facing them here in this country, right now and for the coming years.
We remain extremely concerned by the situation in Afghanistan. For years, Canada has committed to improve future of the Afghan people. And it's with extreme sadness that we are witnessing what's happening in Afghanistan today. And I can guarantee that our diplomats, our public service, and our ministers, as well as myself.
While he repeats this question in French, we've got some word from Jagmeet Singh on what his response to all this is, saying you and your family should be the priority. Instead, Mr. Trudeau has called an election because he's focused on keeping his own job and his rich insider friends happy. New Democrats fight for you. We'll make the rich pay their fair share and build a recovery that benefits everyone. Let's see if Aaron O'Toole has said anything about what's going on here. I'm ready to get our economy surging in the right direction for Canadians to vote Conservative. Okay, all right, interesting. We're gonna keep covering this along the way.
Give Canadians an opportunity to weigh in on how we should carry on our work to see this pandemic to an end and to build back better for the years and decades to come, because we are at a pivotal moment in our history.
Good
Thank
morning,
you. Next
Prime Minister
question.
Marika Walsh with the Globe and Mail. Can you please clarify what the government will still do for the former interpreters and other embassy staff who are Afghans who are still in Afghanistan? Will those people still be brought back to Canada, and how?
The security situation on the ground is extremely fast evolving. We are in close contact with our allies, with the Americans who've increased their troop presence on the ground to secure the airport and the green zone in Afghanistan, in around Kabul. We will continue to work to get as many Afghan interpreters and their families out as quickly as possible, as long as the security situation holds. And we will continue to work over the coming months to resettle refugees who will flee Afghanistan, who will look to come to start new lives in Canada. We've talked about 20,000 of them, and that's something that we're able to do because Canadians will once again open their homes, their communities, and their hearts to people fleeing.
Hey, Ethan, thanks for the support on the channel. I hope you're doing well. A long time no see. I hope you're, Ethan's a great dude.
To thank
Keep
all
Canadian
the members
politics
of the
honest.
Canadian
Keep up the
Armed
good
Forces,
work, bud. That's so nice of you to
past
say.
and
Thanks,
present.
Ethan.
Those who fought so incredibly bravely and saw fellow CAF members fall by the wayside, and for our years of engagement in Afghanistan, but also those who are on the ground right now, continuing to work to support the people who've supported Canadians in our time there. Continue to be there as we speak, working to get as many people out to safety as possible. Our Canadian Armed Forces do an extraordinary job in stepping up, in being there to promote Canadian values, to help people around the world. And today, like every day, they deserve our recognition and thanks.
Following up. Our reporters, not just with the Globe, but from many media outlets, are being flooded with calls from former interpreters and their family in tears, fearing for their life. Meantime, the embassy in Canada has been evacuated, and your government says they're on their way home. So how will you bring these people home, and when will that happen?
We continue to work to process and support people seeking to flee Afghanistan and come to Canada in safety. Obviously, the security situation is extremely concerning on the ground, and the protection of Canadians and our armed forces are top of mind. But we continue to do the work on allowing and enabling people who've been there for Canadians, whether it's interpreters or drivers or security or whatever, to make sure that they're coming to safety. There are also human rights activists and civil society leaders, journalists, and community leaders who we are working with to try and make sure that we are offering them the safety and the future that they deserve.
Prochaine question.
Bonjour, Raymond Fillon de TVA.
Raymond Fillon, TVA. Mr. Trudeau, many Canadians this morning will wonder if it's responsible for the leader of government to be away, to be on the road for 5 or 6 weeks as we begin the fourth wave. Is it responsible? I think it's really important to offer Canadians in this very important moment a choice so that they may weigh in on how we will continue to battle this pandemic, which, as I said, is not over yet. At a point in time when most Canadians are vaccinated and others continue to become vaccinated, and I should say that every day of this campaign, I will be there to encourage people and ask people who have not been vaccinated to get the jab. And I think it will be important in moment when choices that we make as governments and parliaments have a direct impact on people's lives throughout this crisis, but also in years to come. I think it's really important to ask Canadians to weigh in, give them an opportunity to be heard on how we should move through the rest of this pandemic. A pandemic that was not at all on the horizon in the last election in 2019. We didn't know. We couldn't have predicted it was coming. I think we did an extraordinary job in terms of vaccines, rolling out the vaccination campaign. But I think it's also very important that Canadians have the opportunity to weigh in on how to see us through the rest of the pandemic and build back better. Why not wait a few more months until the crisis is behind us? And also, to come back to the question you didn't answer, if you don't get the majority you're looking for, will you resign? It's really important, from my point of view, to underscore how much our situation has improved thanks to the efforts Canadians have made. Our healthcare workers, our frontline workers who did an extraordinary job to see us through this pandemic and keep us safe, but also Canadians who sacrificed a great deal by staying home, by supporting one another, and also, and mainly, by getting the jab in record amounts. We are leading the world on vaccinations. Barbecuing together, we are going into shops. Things are becoming a little bit more normal despite this fourth wave. But I think people understand that our institutions and our democracy are sufficiently robust to work even in difficult times. And in difficult times, when decisions made by Parliament and government will have a tremendous impact on people's lives in the coming months and years, it's important that Canadians have a say.
Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau. Catherine Lévesque, La Presse canadienne.
Catherine Lévesque, Canadian Press. I'm asking the question for the third time. If you end up with a minority government, will you resign? We have come to a point in time when Canadians deserve to be heard, so they can let us know how we should fight this pandemic and especially how we will build back better. And I've unveiled over the past years my values, my point of view on how we should build back better. And I've shown that I have the team, plan to improve the lives of millions of Canadians who are worried, no doubt, but understand that the choices that are being made are essential. Canadians deserve their say on what mandate Parliament and government should have. My job and my commitment to Canadians is that I will continue to be there for them, to support Canadians. I've said it from the beginning, as long as it takes, with all it takes. You didn't quite answer my question, but I'll move on to the next one. In 2019, you began your campaign in BC. You'll be starting this campaign in Quebec. I'm wondering, what will Quebec's importance be during this campaign? And do you expect a majority thanks to the fact that you'll be hitting the hustings in Quebec? Well, I began the campaign last time in BC. I'll be going home to Montreal this afternoon. BC feels like home as well. The impact isn't felt based on what we do every day, but rather how Canadians see what we do every day, how we will continue to fight the pandemic, how we'll build back better. And in all corners of this country, there will be varied concerns. Therefore, I feel that during this election, we'll have the opportunity to hear Canadians' concerns, to hear their point of view. And, of course, Quebec is important for me as a Quebecer, myself, but the entire country is important because we worked together with the Premier premiers throughout this pandemic like never before. We collaborated on childcare, on support during the pandemic for small businesses, for individuals, on fighting climate change. We've always been there to work with all Canadians throughout the country, and will continue to do so.
Mia Rabson from the Canadian Press. You've had a lot of announcements in the last couple of weeks, even this morning, new childcare agreements, long-term care agreements with provinces. You're insisting that you need an election to go to the people to get a mandate, but you're doing all of these things. You didn't wait for an election. So if you can do all of those things without an election, why do you need a mandate further?
This is about giving Canadians an opportunity to weigh in at a really pivotal time. Yes, you talk about the childcare agreements that we've signed with 8 different provinces and territories and are going to ensure that millions upon millions of Canadians have access to affordable childcare. Well, this is something that we talked about in the 2019 election. We talked about it again in the 2021 budget, and we're moving forward on that. But there are many things in regards to ending this pandemic, in regards to building back better, that we didn't talk about 2 years ago in the 2019 election, that I think Canadians have a right to weigh in on. We've seen situations where Conservative backbenchers have referred to some of this government's decisions as tyrannical in terms of how we're creating mandates for vaccination of public servants or vaccination of people on trains and airplanes. Well, the answer to tyranny is to have an election. And I think people who disagree with this government or disagree with this direction should have an opportunity to make themselves heard. And that's what this election is all about. It's allowing Canadians to weigh in. It's allowing Canadians to be heard, allowing Canadians to, in this moment where we are so strongly vaccinated and looking towards the future, not just the end of this pandemic, but how we build back better, looking for an opportunity to make sure the decisions being taken in Parliament and by government are reflective of the hopes and dreams of Canadians.
I'm also curious, with the fourth wave in Canada clearly underway and there's risks of having a pandemic election, what do you think those biggest risks are, and is that worth it to you?
I think obviously with the rise in numbers, case numbers amongst the unvaccinated, that does represent a risk. And that's why it's going to be so important that we continue, all parties, to encourage everyone across this country to continue to get vaccinated. If you haven't gotten your first dose yet, get your first dose. If you're waiting for your second dose, book it now. We need to make sure that as many Canadians as possible are protected against.
As a quick aside, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want to continue to see Canadian content like this. When you do those things, it helps the stream to get out to more people. And if you like this kind of content, definitely hitting those buttons will help me make more of that in the future. Thanks for hanging out. We're going to do some analysis after this speech is done.
My kids have to get tested and show vaccinations before they go to summer camp, the older ones. We're expecting kids to be vaccinated in many different situations, and they're stepping up for that. I think it's the least adults can do to step up and get vaccinated to protect those kids who can't get vaccinated yet. And that's the message we're going to keep pushing out there, that people need to continue to get vaccinated. And we're going to keep moving forward on measures that both encourage people to get vaccinated, but also make it more difficult for unvaccinated people to spread the disease to others. This is an important principle that this government is taking, and it's certainly something that, amongst others, Canadians have a right to weigh in on, and that's what this election will be about.
Thank you. We'll take one last question.
Bonjour, Juliane Lapointe de Radio-Canada. Monsieur Trudeau, vous dites vouloir entendre le choix des Canadiens.
Mr. Trudeau, you say you want to hear Canadians express their choice, but many Canadians have said they don't want an election. What do you say to people that feel that public funds shouldn't be used for an election campaign when they had to tighten their belt for months? I think people understand that we are not living normal times. This is a crisis. There is a pandemic. We're thinking about how we could build our society back in a better fashion. We have a government and a parliament that have taken important decisions over the past 17 months that will have an impact on Canadians' lives for years to come. I think we've come to a point in time when Canadians deserve to be heard, deserve to have a say, to decide how we should move through the end of this pandemic and the coming years, how we can build back better. That's democracy. It provides Canadians the opportunity to be heard and to choose the direction of government and parliament. And therefore, Canadians will have an opportunity and should have an opportunity to be heard during this election on the pandemic and the future. I know that millions of Canadians throughout this country want to be heard, want to have a say on decisions we are making, on choices we'll be making in the months and years to come. And this election is their opportunity to do so. A new government means a period of adjustment, new MPs, people who will have to learn the ropes. So how will you be able to hit the ground running, given that the fourth wave at that point after the elections could have hit the country hard? Firstly, the government's job to continue to protect Canadians carries on throughout this pandemic. We will continue to do the necessary work with respect to Afghanistan, Haiti, where once again there has been a horrible earthquake that breaks our hearts. The government and our partners in the provinces will continue to do this work to keep Canadians safe in the weeks to come. We will ensure that new MPs are greeted with enthusiasm. They'll be sent to Ottawa by local voters, and I'm sure that Canadians relish this opportunity to choose a representative, a person who will represent their future, somebody who will take very important decisions for our country. I think it's a pivotal moment for all Canadians, and I can't wait to show our vision and to share with Canadians my optimism for this country together.
I think one of the things we know is that even while there's an election going on, the work of our government continues, whether it's dealing with Afghanistan or dealing with the heartbreak of yet another terrible earthquake in Haiti, or whether it's continuing to do the necessary work to keep Canadians safe through this pandemic and work with our partners across all the provinces who are themselves working very hard on dealing with this fourth wave amongst unvaccinated people. Our institutions are strong. The opportunity we have right now for Canadians to make themselves heard and to send, in many cases, new representatives to Ottawa to be their voices for their communities in Ottawa, to be able to have their choices resonate not just through the end of this pandemic, but into the coming years and decades as we build back better. This is a moment in which Canadians deserve to have their voices heard. Canadians deserve to make their choices. And like I said, I'll leave it for the others to explain why they don't think Canadians should get to weigh in this extraordinarily consequential, historic moment.
Merci beaucoup. C'est ce qui m'a fait la conférence de presse d'aujourd'hui. This is what I said, Presser.
Merci tout le monde.
Okay, so I wonder if we're going to hear from other party leaders after that speech. Okay, so interesting stuff. I'm going to keep this up in the background. Let's go over some of the main points that we just heard from there. I've got some notes here. I'm going to keep this up on the stream when we talk about it. But definitely an interesting press conference. Not a lot of answers as to like why this election is being called that many people were hoping to get. Again, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be covering stuff like this this all throughout the election, especially in the areas that we like to talk about most on this channel when it comes to housing and real estate, as well as investing in these policies that are going to affect Canadians and their money. That's sort of the things we like to focus here on the channel, but of course we're going to be covering everything, including the various benefits and supports that have been here throughout the pandemic. So yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. Again, make sure to hit that like button. It helps it get out to more people, and if you appreciate this sort of at least attempting to be right down the middle coverage, then make sure to hit those things. But we've got a lot of different things here. I'm going to go over some of these points that we've gotten. So September 20th, that's the confirmed election date. You can mark it on your calendar. Justin Trudeau came out in his speech and really focused on a couple different talking points, a couple different, I'm going to go full cam here and throw chat back up here so you guys can chat with me here. So a lot of different points that the Liberals were bringing up. It seems like there are four main issues that the Liberals are going to be focusing on throughout this election. The first one is the climate crisis. This is what Justin Trudeau was just saying. I'm just recapping, right? Potentially the economy, the recession we've been through, but he was also talking about childcare, and he said that like the Liberals, again, I'm just reiterating, you think of this what you might, but he said the Liberals, hey, the first thing what we did 6 years ago when we came into power, we strengthened the middle class, made it easier for people to join the middle class. Some people may have things to say about that, but I'll leave that to you. And he said like that's what we're going to be focusing on next, like getting more good middle class jobs, doing more on climate change, doing more on childcare. And then he also sort of addressed young people, young Canadians, saying, hey, I know young people, you're worried about how to afford a home. It's tough, it's unacceptable, and we will continue to make life more affordable. So sort of acknowledging the issues here around housing, but not really sort of addressing some of the concerns that are like what the chief causes for this. Actually, the PBO, the Parliamentary Budget Officer, this is like the office that sort of runs the numbers on political policies. They actually put out a press release and a report on all the housing policies, and the result was like, hey, this isn't going to dramatically affect things, but I digress. We got into questions here from different reporters saying that, hey, the NDP supports you. How do you justify an election that's going to cost $500 million? And Justin Trudeau, every time he was asked in this press conference about whether or not he thought it was responsible to call an election, generally the response was, hey, right now is a time like unlike any before. We've never been through a time like this. So we need to give Canadians a choice. We need to get a new mandate from Canadians to allow them to actually voice their concerns. He sort of brought up the idea that like many of their policies are pushing forward Canadians to get more and more vaccinated. And he sort of addressed that some people don't share those views, and those people deserve a voice as well. This is what Trudeau said. And saying that like an election gives people the ability to gives them the ability to get a finger on the pulse of what Canadians really believe and what the mandate going forward is going to be. And then one other sort of awkward question that was asked to Justin Trudeau was, if you don't get a majority, will you resign? Will you resign, saying like, hey, your goals and the reason you're calling this election essentially didn't work out. If you don't get a majority, are you going to resign? He sort of didn't answer any of those questions when they were asked, sort of transition them into saying Canadians deserve the right to choose a party right now. There was also one kind of like awkward moment where she like directly asked him a second time, and he sort of had to pause and then transition into answering a different question. Of course, going into a campaign, you don't want to be talking about what will happen if you lose. So from a campaign perspective, it does make sense that he would avoid that question, but it doesn't really play into one of the main concerns and criticisms of Trudeau is that he doesn't answer questions directly. So interesting stuff. Those are some of the main points. I'm wondering if we're going to get more here from other political parties. I'm just sort of searching for things here. And by the way, if you guys are finding things or any documents or any information that you want covered here on the stream, take a look at this. This is something I'm being more active on lately. It's Twitter. Make sure to follow me here at Russ Matthews, RUSSMATTHEWS 32. That's my Twitter handle. I know it's not the nicest, but inside here there's a lot going on when it comes to what's going on with the election here. But we're not. I don't think we've seen anything new from any other federal leader. We're going to go check out Aaron O'Toole's Twitter here. Okay, so the choice to, okay, so he's live actually. Let's see what the Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole is talking about.
Across the country, families have lost loved ones before their time. Hardworking Canadians have lost their jobs and have seen the cost of living skyrocket. We're finally at a point, thanks to the efforts of all Canadians who've stayed at home, got tested, got vaccinated, where we can see our loved ones, our friends, and our families again. We shouldn't be risking that for political games or political gain. La dernière année a été difficile pour tout le monde. Partout au pays, des familles ont perdu des proches, des travailleurs ont perdu leur emploi et les prix continuent d'augmenter. Les Canadiens ont fait de nombreux efforts. Pendant la pandémie, vous êtes restés à la maison, vous vous êtes fait tester et vous avez reçu le vaccin. Cela a porté ses fruits, car on peut maintenant revoir nos proches, nos amis.
I wish
et
we
nos
had a
familles.
translation here.
Mais il ne faut pas mettre en péril tous nos efforts pour des jeux ou des gains politiques. A leader who cared about the best interests of Canadians would be straining every sinew to secure the recovery right now. Instead, Justin Trudeau has called an election. That's Justin Trudeau's choice. And I hope that his decision doesn't cost Canadians too dearly. My wife Rebecca and I had COVID-19. We know the fears and uncertainties that are out there. But let's be clear. This election is not about the next week, the next month, or even the next year. It's about the next 4 years. It's about who will deliver the economic recovery Canada needs. It's about who will take action to protect Canadians from spiraling living costs, from rising taxes, from poorer services. For the past 6 years, we've been promised solutions, and year after year after year, Justin Trudeau has let the Canadian people down. The result? Hard-pressed families struggling to pay bills and worried about the cost of food, of housing, of heating. And the Liberal Party's answer? To ask you to reward them with another 4 years of majority government for doing the bare minimum. Another 4 years of broken promises and of letting Canadians down. And the NDP, Greens, and Bloc Québécois, they support spending other people's money as much as the Liberals. They're all the same. Depuis 6 ans, on nous promet des solutions. Et année après année, Justin Trudeau laisse tomber les Canadiens. Le résultat, des familles stressées qui ont de la difficulté à payer leurs factures. Des gens qui s'inquiètent du prix des aliments, du logement et du chauffage. La réponse du Parti libéral, il vous demande de la récompenser avec 4 autres années. 4 autres années à faire de fausses promesses, à faire le minimum et à laisser tomber les Canadiens. Et le Bloc, l'NPD et les Verts, comme les libéraux, ils veulent dépenser votre argent. Ils sont tous pareils. Business as usual isn't enough. Canadians need more. Canada needs more. We need a strong economy to support high wages for workers and great infrastructure. We need a strong economy so that today's Canadians can have confidence that tomorrow will be brighter for the next generation. Canadians deserve to know what their politicians will deliver. They deserve to know that there's a plan, and they deserve a government that will keep its word. 12 years in the military have taught me to always have a plan. Canada's recovery plan will unite our country and secure the future. I am a new Conservative leader with a proven track record and a fresh approach. It's Canada's recovery plan to get our economy firing on all cylinders and to get our public finances under control. It's our plan to secure 1 million jobs, tough new anti-corruption laws, mental health action, securing Canadian-made medical supplies, balancing the budget. Les 12 ans que j'ai passés dans les forces armées canadiennes m'ont appris qu'il faut toujours avoir un plan. C'est ce qu'on va faire avec le plan de rétablissement du Canada. Le plan de rétablissement va nous aider à relancer notre économie et à bien gérer nos finances publiques. C'est notre plan pour agir. 1 million d'emplois, une nouvelle loi anticorruption sévère, de l'action en santé mentale, des fournitures médicales fabriquées au Canada, un budget équilibré et des solutions à la pénurie de main-d'œuvre. The alternative is Justin Trudeau's entitled government, borrowing $424 million a day, racking up $1.4 trillion of debt that he's going to ask you and your children to pay back. We can't afford more of the same. We can't afford more borrowing and higher costs of living while Justin hands out contracts to his friends. Conservatives will stand up for hardworking Canadians and their families. We'll work for you, not a small group of people in Ottawa who help themselves, lobbyists, donors, and friends of the Liberal Party. We'll work relentlessly to make sure that for generations to come, Canadians can grow up with world-class services, a healthy economy, and healthy finances. Canada is a country where politicians must earn trust, not one where you're born into power and can take it for granted. Our team is ready to get to work, to earn your vote, and then deliver that plan. The election is about the future, and the choice is this. Who do you trust to secure your economic future? There are 5 parties, but 2 choices. Canada's Conservatives or more of the same. Vote for a strong economy. Vote for Canada's recovery plan. Vote to secure the future. Vote Conservative. À qui faites-vous confiance pour agir pour votre avenir économique? Il y a 5 partis, mais 2 choix. Les conservateurs d'un côté, ou plus de scandales, plus de dépenses et plus de dettes de l'autre. Votez pour une économie forte. Votez pour le plan de rétablissement du Canada. Votez pour l'avenir. Votez conservateur. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
Okay, interesting. So I guess that's all from Aaron O'Toole. Just launched this live on Twitter here. So lots of comments from him. Lots of talk about affordability and how that is an issue right now in Canada. And he's trying to sort of lump all the other parties together, saying the NDP, Liberals, and Green are all the same. They're spending other people's money. Lots of criticism about how much a national debt we've taken on as a country, and sort of playing on this idea, saying like, hey, Canadians, we've got all this national debt. It's huge, and Trudeau, if he's reelected, he's going to ask you and your children to pay this back. Again, like I said, this is what Aaron O'Toole is saying. I'm just relaying it to you. He says we can't afford more borrowing, and Conservatives will stand up for hardworking Canadians, not lobbyists in Ottawa. Some of the main points there from Aaron O'Toole's speech. Interesting stuff. The whole debt situation. Something I find super, super interesting, and I'm not convinced that any party knows what to do about it, because at this point it's not feasible to like ever, and this is the same for many governments like across the world. It with all the quantitative easing and a new addition of money into the system and large borrowing by governments supported by quantitative easing with the central banks. It's a tough situation, and I don't think that with tax revenue, we're ever going to be able to pay that off. So there's a debate around like, hey, do we keep running it up when we have low interest rates right now? Or do we be more prudent and not spend that, even though we have low interest rates comparatively right now to like the rest of history, essentially? Interesting takes all around when it comes to that. Wow, interesting. Okay, so I'm monitoring on my other pages here what's going on. I'm wondering if we're going to hear from the leader of the NDP, Jagmeet Singh. That's the last like major party, or like I guess party that has a little bit of steam behind them in terms of I don't need to qualify for this guy. You guys know what I mean. The NDP leader hasn't spoken yet, and we're wondering if that's going to happen. I've got a couple other news sources up here on the side. If you guys see something and you want me to see it, again, you can message me on Twitter, or you can hop into the Discord. Both of those links and those social media things are down there in the description. And while you're at it, make sure to like the stream. It sends it out to more people. And if you like Canadian content like this that tries to be down the middle, then make sure to do those things as well. Okay, interesting stuff. Let's see. I'm going to go switch here and see, because Jagmeet Singh did tweet a little bit during Trudeau's speech. I wonder if there's anything else. Okay, so the same sort of message that he had before, you and your family should be the priority. Instead, Mr. Trudeau has called an election because he keeps focusing on his own job and keeping his rich insider friends happy. Kind of like a similar talking point to what Erin O'Toole said. I've noticed this lately that the NDP and the Conservatives often have the similar criticisms of Trudeau, even though they're coming at it from different sides of the political spectrum. New Democrats fight for you will make the rich pay their fair share and build a recovery that benefits everyone. I will give the NDP this. They did release the most full-fledged plan on what they would do if they were elected. We've gone over that a little bit here on the channel. But the main problem with that plan is that there's not a lot of details on how the spending would work out. They're sort of saying, here's what we want to do, and we'll figure out how much it's going to cost later and how that's all going to play out. So I think that they're going to take a little bit of flack for that, but definitely the most detailed plan on some promises that they've made. Interesting stuff. Okay. I'm not seeing anything here where it seems like he's going to be speaking. Let me see. Yeah, so nothing that seems like it's live right now from Jagmeet Singh. Oh, I think that we know this because he's marching in a parade today of some sort. I think that's the case. Correct me if I'm wrong, chat, but I think that's what's going on here. All right. So yeah, interesting stuff. We got that. We got the speech from Trudeau. We got his sort of reasoning behind why he wants an election. Calls for him to resign if he doesn't get a majority, to which he didn't respond to, as well as some information from the Conservatives on what they're going to be platforming or campaigning on, what their platform is going to be. So interesting stuff here. All right. Okay, so I think we're going to wind down this stream. Again, make sure, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. We're going to be covering this whenever there's some interesting stuff right here on the channel. Likely a lot more live streams. If there's debates, we'll be able to hang out and chat here as well during those debates in the future. Again, we only have 36 days now until we're going to be all going to the polls, so it's going to be interesting to see how this evolves with literally the shortest possible campaign period that you can have in an election. So it's going to be very, very interesting to watch. We're going to wrap up the stream here shortly, but I always like to do this at the end of the streams. If you want to hang around for a few minutes extra and ask any questions about anything we cover here on the channel, make sure to @ me in the chat, @Russell Matthews, and it'll pop up orange for me, and I can see it more clearly on my side thing where I'm watching my chat here. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, and make sure to come back next time if you're heading out here before we do this little Q&A session. All right. Jordan says, thanks, Russell. I watch all your content. Keep it coming, friend. Good luck. Thanks so much, Jordan. I appreciate the support. We see Grant saying that. Thank you so much, Grant. Gabriel, Lisa, John, Chronic, DM. Thanks for hanging out in the chat, everyone. Yeah, that's an interesting question, H. I would say no. Okay. All right. DM, thank you. Yeah, thanks for tuning in. Again, any questions or any topics that you want me to sort of cover here in the last few minutes of the stream, let me know, and then we'll call it a day if there isn't any. Yeah, thanks, Roadrunner. Thanks for tuning in. Lisa, Matt, Jane, thanks for hanging out in chat. Debbie. A UBI should have been mentioned, says DM. Yeah, interesting. It seems like the Liberals likely won't be campaigning on something like that. Maybe they don't think that there's the political will for it, but it is in the NDP's plan. A guaranteed livable income, not exactly UBI, but check out the video on my channel. We just covered that and what their NDP plan is there. Alex K says, Russell, markets will go sideways until the end of September and then rip to all-time highs. Oh, that's an interesting take. Is there anything that you're sort of like basing that off of? Are we thinking like maybe like after, like as things open up further, that you're expecting like higher earnings from companies for investments? Yeah, thanks, Sally. I appreciate the support. Yeah, and Salzi. The Matash asks, would you be doing a video on what their parties stand for? Likely, like down the road, as we get more and more details, we'll do more comparison videos. That's definitely something that could be coming in the future. Elections always trigger market highs. Okay, interesting. It'll be interesting to see if that is going to play out again here, Alex. DM says GLI is better than nothing. George is asking, what do you think of the Bank of Canada efforts towards a central bank digital currency? I think that they're ages behind where other countries are. We see China that has an extremely developed CBDC infrastructure with Alipay and WeChat. So that's like definitely something that's been developed there. I think Canada's not really taking it seriously, but they do have a panel like that, and they've been studying like what would happen when they do need, so that they can be ready if they do need to implement a CBDC or a central bank digital currency. Essentially, it's like creating a centralized cryptocurrency that could be like what the Canadian dollar is transferred into. But I think a lot of the allure of cryptocurrency is that it is less of a centralized body who's issuing the monetary policy, and it is less likely to be debased by various governments. So I think that a CBDC wouldn't be the most popular to actually like pull away like the benefits that cryptocurrencies are actually affording people, especially here in Canada, right? So I think that they're quite a lot behind when it comes to a CBDC. And I think that there are better non-central bank issued cryptocurrencies that could provide better solutions that could actually make life a lot better for people in the future. But that's what I'm diving into really heavily now. I'm pretty deep into the Ethereum ecosystem in terms of trying to learn about that and get into it. But we can talk about that more later. Lisa says, will you be live during the elections? Yes, I will be. So make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell if you want to keep on tuning in as this happens. All the way up to election night, we'll be covering as much as we can. I'm out of town here for the next few days, but hopefully I'll be able to cover as much as I can here when we get back. Alex says, remember when I mentioned lumber futures were falling in price? Watch housing market cool off to come. I think I nailed that. Yeah, you might be right. We'll see here what's going to happen that way. It's been interesting because there's been less sales lately in the real estate markets across Canada on average, but the SNLR, the sales to new listing ratio, that has actually gone up, or has gone up. So there's been more sales comparatively to new listings, and of course that describes the supply and demand dynamics that affect housing prices heavily. So that's interesting to see that even though there's less sales happening, there are proportionally less listings happening. So in terms of price, it'll be interesting to see how, like what you said, like the lumber futures and the lumber prices going down, maybe it makes it more affordable to build and renovate resale homes as well. Yeah, it'll be, nobody has a crystal ball, but I'll be keeping my eye on it for you. Yeah, Sam Preet, thanks for the support. Yeah, thanks for your content, always informative. That's nice of you to say. Russell, do you think a savings in crime could offset UBI? So you're saying the cost of a UBI, you're saying that like maybe that would prevent a lot of crime and a lot of people in desperate situations who commit crime from doing that. Potentially there could be. I think that when it comes to any sort of UBI or GLI or whatever you want to call it, programs like that, I think it's very, very, very difficult to assess whether or not it's a good idea or a bad idea until we have actual drafted legislation, because until then, like everything's just words and promises, right? But once we get actual hard copy legislation, then we can evaluate whether or not it's good and how it's going to work out, right? That's the way that I see things, is that I'm not in support or against anything until we see like the inner structures on how things are actually going to roll out. Alex K says, that's right, more sales because sellers are realizing the market is correcting. Yeah, potentially. But if we have more sales and not more listings, price goes up, right? Because of the supply and demand sort of dynamics there. So what I'm saying is the sales to new listing ratio is going up, meaning there's more sales, right? But less new listings, right? So there's not enough inventory to satisfy the demand, I guess is what I'm saying with the SNLR sort of comment there, Alex. And then Alex Guolo says, your vote doesn't matter, they're all parasites. Yeah, it can be frustrating sometimes if you don't feel like your voice is sort of represented there. Tone says, Bill C-10 would help your channel reach more Canadians. Why do people feel it is about censorship? Yeah, so that's definitely a controversial topic, Bill C-10. It didn't get passed before Parliament dissolved here, but that was. I think that the issue with Bill C-10 is that it's not very clear on what exactly it would do and what all those details would be. Like I said, the devil's in the details. Any policy, Bill C-10, it didn't seem like it was very thoroughly thought out by the Heritage Minister in terms of like saying like this is how things will work. Instead, it was just a bill saying, hey, CRTC, you're now going to have the power to regulate the internet similarly to how you do with the radio and TV and other media sources in Canada. So I think that the other parties were frustrated with Bill C-10 because it's like, hey, we're just going to give more power to the CRTC, something that we don't have the ability to sort of to change very quickly, but they can sort of regulate things and move very quickly. I think a lot of parties would rather have things be more of a clear line drawn in the sand, like, hey, this is how it's going to work, rather than just offloading like legislative or regulatory responsibility. Gabriel says, do you think crypto will replace bonds and managed retirement portfolios in the future? Maybe not like replacing fixed income like bonds, but certainly like I think that the fact that bonds, the yield has gone down so much as bond prices have gone up, supported by the Bank of Canada's purchasing programs, definitely makes crypto and other more risky assets. I think this is why like crypto and real estate and some of these other alternative assets have been so pumped throughout the pandemic, is because now you can't get yield on your savings in a bank. You barely can get your yield on investments in bonds. So it's like, hey, like we've got to move somewhere where we're going to get yields and where our because right now, like bond yields, like the inflation numbers are outpacing the yields of bonds. So nobody really wants fixed income right now. So that's why everyone's sort of merging into these other spaces. But I do think that more and more so people are slowly getting used to the idea of like, hey, maybe a certain portion of cryptocurrency should be inside of your investment portfolio. Obviously not financial advice. I always have to do that disclaimer here on the channel. Nothing you hear on this channel is ever financial advice, just a starting point for you to do your own research to make your own decisions. Tammy says, thank you for everything. I noticed you made a comment earlier about being careful what you post. I'm new to this. I made a few comments today. Am I going by the guidelines? Tammy, I didn't see your individual comments, but the way you phrase this makes it seem like you're very respectful. And that's what I like to sort of keep here. As long as people are being respectful to each other and aren't spamming, I'm fine with the other things being included in the chat, even if they don't line up with everyone's views. It's okay to have different views. And I think this is one of my goals for the channel, is to try to allow conversation for both sides and allow a space where there are multiple people from different perspectives. I think definitely on YouTube, I could get a lot more viewers if I were to skew one side or the other and start doing that. That's definitely what we see in social media, people getting pushed to the fringes because it gets more clicks, gets more views. That's what I'm going to try not to do here on the channel. So as long as you're like nobody in the chat is like attacking each other personally, it's okay to have an actual informed and rational discussion, as long as it's not getting too heated and we're all friendly to each other, because we all want what's best for Canada and we all want what's best for us and our families, and I think we can find a common ground there. But yeah, interesting question there, Tammy, on like how chat's going to work going forward in the future. As long as it doesn't get too rowdy and too pointed at individuals, I'm totally fine with it. Thanks for tuning in, Tammy, by the way. Alex says Glassnode is showing a wall of money buying stable coins, not necessarily crypto though. Well, I guess stable coins are crypto though, right? So, because most stable coins are ERC20 tokens that run on the Ethereum EVM, the Ethereum virtual machine, run on the Ethereum network, right? Because Ethereum has its native currency ETH, but also it allows for a standardized way to create tokens of various tokens, and that's why there's been different organizations that have created stablecoins like USDT, USDC. We also have DAI and RAI, different stablecoins that are pegged to some sort of thing to keep them stable. But I guess that is still sort of an inflow into crypto because it's running on the Ethereum mainnet. Oh, Lisa, cool. You're tuning in from Lucid Dream asks, are we getting a CBDC? Maybe sometime in the future. I think that it definitely it's beneficial for governments to do that, more trackable. I think it would be easier to prevent sort of money laundering and things like that if you have like a ledger that you can sort of see all transactions and have that sort of tied to some sort of centralized exchange. But I think that Canada's far behind on their development of that, especially compared to other major global nations. So I think that it'll come a lot later than we might expect. Gary, nothing new in particular. I think that there might have been some announcements from Carla Qualtrough, but again, I think that most of that would be something that would happen after the election if there's any other changes benefits-wise. Pony says, Russell, what happens to the help we've been getting if the Liberals lose? Well, it depends on who wins and what their policies are, right? The NDP certainly are in support of continuing more supports. GLI is something they want to work towards. Lots of ideas inside of that we covered earlier on the channel, maybe a couple days ago. Yeah. Hey, Brett, how's it going? Nexo Crypto Wallet offers a 90% loan to value on loans and up to 12% ROI on. Also, interest is paid daily. The kind of options in the future of banking. Yeah, like I'm not too familiar with Nexo Wallet or anything like that, but yeah, you can. I like cryptocurrency, especially because. It's very permissionless. Anyone has access to all the things. So like if you have collateral, you can get loans, right, against whatever your portfolio is, and that's not permissioned, right? You don't have to go to a banker to get your loan, but at the same time, it's only over collateralized loans that they have. So your portfolio, you can only take out a loan as in most cases, like if you're working on Aave or Compound or some of these other lending platforms, you do need to have the collateral there before you can take a loan out against it. But there is work being done in under collateralized loans. An under collateralized loan would be like a mortgage or something like that, where you don't necessarily have the collateral to back up the amount of money you're borrowing. Alex K says, Ajax and Durham region home sales performing well. Any specific areas you see the growth heading? Yeah, so that's interesting. We've seen so much growth out here in the Durham region. That's where I'm from, like about a half hour east of Toronto. We've seen a lot of growth there. I think that's likely going to continue. A little bit of a flattening as like some people are believing that like people from Toronto have sort of migrated out. This is what the Bank of Canada always pushes, this narrative of people moving out of Toronto and going to the suburbs, like expanding outwards to the fringes of the GTA. You could definitely see more development out in the Curtis Bowmanville area. Home prices have shot up out there, but also I think that there's going to be more and more expansion between like the Durham region all the way out to Kingston. There's a lot of less growing or communities that haven't seen as much growth. I have friends that have moved to Napanee and places like that, Belleville, Trenton. These are areas that are sort of along that sort of 401 line that could see more growth. But again, nobody has a crystal ball, so it's hard to know for sure, Alex. Adriano says, keep up the good work. Russell tuned in from Brazil. Oh, very cool. I would love to hear your thoughts in the future on the economic relationship between Brazil and Canada. Yeah, that'd be definitely something I need to do a little bit more looking into, not something I'm an expert on. I always like to have a little bit, or be honest about when I don't know as much as I should about something. But interesting that you're tuning in from Brazil. Very cool, Adriano. Napanee so far. Yeah. Yeah, it is far, especially if you're coming from Toronto, Alex, or if you're in Durham. Yeah, it is a little ways. I'm headed out there next weekend to see a friend that lives out there. That'll be good. Yeah, this is this frustrating thing, CS Postal. Yeah, and tripling of home values by overbidding and pricing lifelong residences or like residents out of their homes. Yeah, I mean, it's challenging, right? We've seen this. People grow up in a community and now high prices aren't affordable for them anymore. And it's like, are they forced to leave that community? Unfortunately, I haven't seen any political party that I think has enough measures in line to actually like make an impact there, right? A meaningful impact. I think that there's too many things that need to happen to actually help housing. Some sort of loosening of regulations in terms of private building and allowing for more growth, right? There's also incentives right now in various municipalities and towns across the country that incentivize urban intensification, right? Having more vibrant cities and less urban sprawl, largely thought to be a good thing. But if you have these sort of restrictions against building new homes and expanding further and further, then of course the prices of those homes are going to go up. Also, politicians and leaders likely aren't too incentivized to do anything to lower home prices or make them more affordable, because that also reflects in the data that they're often evaluated on in terms of their performance, right? So much of housing is tied up in the GDP of a country, and if you're the one who comes in and like dramatically decreases home values, Canadians feel less wealthy, they spend less on these sort of tertiary industries that are huge GDP contributors. So if you as a party force real estate prices to go down or to plateau, you get less spending, less economic activity, and then as a result, maybe you look worse as a politician because you're like, hey, we have the worst GDP growth in 20 years under your leadership. What's the deal? So it's like there's like every time you try to tackle an issue, there's like it's like a lose-lose situation, because when you give on one point, there's other consequences to those sort of sacrifices that you're making. All right. Beautiful. Well, thanks so much for tuning in, everyone. I think we're going to call it there. I'm going to try to get a sort of summary video up, and then a video sort of just my sort of every 2 weeks one that I do to help people figure out what's going on with the CRB. But I appreciate you guys for tuning in. I guess I haven't needed these for a while on this Sunday. Thanks for hanging out. I love seeing everyone in the chat. I say this every time, but you're the people that I actually recognize watching the channel, and I recognize your names when you tune in time and time again. I appreciate the support from the people who have sent in super chats and things like that. If you haven't already done so, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, the like button, if you want to see this continue and this sort of Canadian content being produced. I appreciate all of you for hanging out with me, and again, all of the people that have been here time and time again. I appreciate you as always. I hope you have a good rest of your weekend. Enjoy the Sunday, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one, everyone. We'll see you later.